Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 3 of the series. Chapter 35, Chapter 35, Chapter 34, The True Wall of Size _1. Chapter 35, Chapter 34, The True Wall of Size _1. As soon as Fu Qian spoke, the men who had sought his appraisal trembled, nearly dropping the object in his hands to the ground. Hair! Have you ever seen hair that even a knife can't cut through? After steadying his emotions, the brother obviously became somewhat angry. It's special hair. Fu Qian remained expressionless. He had no intention of scaring this gentleman, but equally, he had no interest in making up some lie. Unfortunately, what this gentleman treasured was indeed a spool of hair. However, the surface of these strands of hair shimmered with a special luster, making them appear as though they were alive. As for why it was so clear that this gentleman couldn't see it, Fu Qian had already guessed the answer. Having encountered a similar incident when slaying the progeny of the evil god, he was the only one among all the people who could see the text in the notebook. It was most likely still related to inspiration. What others saw might not be the same as what he saw. However, the gentleman's words just now had given him a very useful piece of information. This kind of hair became more abundant the closer one got to the interior of the ruins, so by following these traces, one could easily determine the direction from which they had come. It was also the direction for leaving the ruins. Ji Liuhuang had obviously been paying attention to the situation here the whole time, and Fu Qian's answer naturally reached her ears. Although the mention of the hair made her frown as well, she didn't directly question it but instead subconsciously glanced around her. She was quite perceptive. Fu Qian silently commended her. The next moment, Ji Liuhuang's expression changed, and she stood up swiftly, drawing her long sword as a fierce sword energy whistled out. A stream of hair-like black, which no one knew when had meandered to their feet along the ground. At the closest point, it almost climbed onto the foot of a girl, but fortunately, Ji Liuhuang's sword cut it off in time. Throw away what's in your hands. With a successful strike, Ji Liuhuang shouted towards them. The young man seeking Fu Qian's appraisal was stunned for a moment before he realized what was happening, somewhat reluctant subconsciously. But Ji Liuhuang's words carried a momentum that ultimately made him throw the object in his hands away. However, the moment the hair left his hand, each strand on it suddenly stood straight like needles, twining towards his hand. There was another flash of the sword, and Ji Liuhuang, not known when, was already in front, chopping the strands of hair off. Even with such quick reflexes, the young man's hand was already deeply pierced by several strands of hair, turning his entire right hand bloodless in an instant. Fire! With a single word from Ji Liuhuang, the young man snapped out of his daze, heat gathering in his hand instantly, as if flames were burning, and the hair that had pierced the flesh was burned away. Thank you. He was now ashen-faced, giving a heartfelt thanks. If Ji Liuhuang had not been decisive in her actions, he feared his situation would now be far worse than just a limp, powerless right hand. Ji Liuhuang simply nodded lightly, her eyes, however, were fixed on another direction. Somehow, Fu Qian, who had been sitting there, had vanished without a trace. At this moment, several screams rang out as a tide-like surge of black hair swept in from several directions. These people really don't understand what caution is, knowing something was amiss and yet they still ventured this far in. Fu Qian navigated through the fog, lamenting to himself as he did so. He had noticed the disturbance behind the broken wall earlier than Ji Liuhuang, but instead of taking action, he took advantage of the chaos to leave the group. In his view, while these hair strands were bizarre and bloodthirsty, the team should still be able to handle them. For him, the mission was the top priority. Most ideally, he would walk out the opposite direction, and the mission would be completed. Although from previous experience, the likelihood was nearly zero. He didn't encounter any obstructions along the way, and without expending much effort, Fu Qian found himself at the edge of the ruins. At this location, the various broken walls and remnants were extremely sparse, and the mist had almost completely dissipated. Still no sign of any substantive barriers. Is this it? Fu Qian frowned, an ominous feeling causing him to slow his pace. The next moment, his body hit some sort of barrier. Looking at the empty space before him, Fu Qian extended a hand to press against the hindered spot. What he felt was a smooth surface, as if there was a fully transparent shield in the air. It seemed this was the boundary of the furnace. He thought about the strange sight in the warehouse, that huge sphere. Could this thing be a spherical barrier enveloping the entire ruins? Fu Qian quickly formulated a guess. If that was indeed the case, although it might not be deadly, intuitively it seemed quite troublesome. Let's try the most simple method first. When dealing with the unknown, testing, summarizing, hypothesizing, and verifying is the most scientific approach to understanding. Although the existence of this thing wasn't exactly scientific. Flexing his fingers, Fu Qian adjusted his breathing and unleashed a punch towards the position of the barrier. The barrier didn't tremble in the slightest, nor did it make any sound. The force of the rebound nearly burst his blood vessels, feeling like he had hammered a mountain. As expected, brute force was ineffective. Even though he had used at most 70% of his strength, from the feedback, it was clear that breaking this thing with his own power was impossible. Luckily, Fu Qian hadn't held much hope for this method, so he wasn't too disappointed. Next, with a try-and-see attitude, Fu Qian shot 2 air bullets towards the barrier. The air bullets whistled as they struck the barrier, failing to cause any ripples. This thing was unbelievably tough, almost beyond the category of being sturdy. It didn't even show a hint of reaction. Looking at the world outside, tantalizingly close, Fu Qian furrowed his brow. From the conversation they had heard from Ji Liu Huang and the others, it was known that they found these ruins unintentionally while out exploring and training. Later on, entering here, they faced no hindrances at all, which suggested unless the barrier had just appeared, it should allow one-way passage, with no problems entering from the outside. Was it repelling specific objects? Organic life forms? Fu Qian picked up a stone and threw it at the barrier. The stone flew halfway, undoubtedly hitting the barrier and dropping straight down. It seemed that whether alive or inanimate, the effect was the same. One could only enter but not exit. Fu Qian seemed to understand how all the various strange and curious things inside the ruins came to be. This was quite the predicament. Especially since, from what had just happened, there clearly were hostile creatures inside. It was uncertain whether one could stay here and think of a solution. As Fu Qian pondered, he turned around and shouted in a certain direction. "Come out." 5 seconds later, behind a half-broken steel, a middle-aged man slowly emerged. The man clapped his hands as he looked at Fu Qian appreciatively. "Not bad at all, you actually noticed my presence." Chapter 36, Chapter 36, Chapter 35 What weapon do you use _1? Chapter 36, Chapter 35 What weapon do you use _1? Fu Qian glanced at the middle-aged man who came out after looking at the steel. He was slightly overweight, with an average appearance, and was wearing loose-fitting clothes. His hair was a bit sparse in front, and he had a smile on his face that made him look, at first glance, like a 25-year-old programmer. As soon as he had left the group, he had noticed someone following him. He hadn't paid any attention to it at first, but, to his surprise, that person had relentlessly pursued him all the way here. Although he seemed harmless, the man who just emerged moved without making a sound, and he was so light on his feet it was as if he had no mass. He was clearly adept at skulking and stealth. Being targeted by such a character usually didn't bode well. "I must say, you've surprised me quite a bit." The middle-aged man looked at Fu Qian, his eyes gleaming like a cat toying with a mouse. "On the surface, you don't show off or stand out, but in reality, your level might be the highest in your team. Even I almost lost track of you. So unassuming and patient, you're bound to achieve great things given time. Of course, that's assuming you have any time left. You flatter me." Fu Qian kept his eyes on the invisible barrier, dismissing the men with a noncommittal remark, as if he hadn't heard the latter's ominous last sentence. His reaction clearly wasn't what the middle-aged man had expected, and he narrowed his eyes. "I'm actually a bit curious, can you tell me why you left your group and came here all alone? What are you trying to do?" "Running away. Running away." This response clearly surprised the middle-aged man. "Yeah, the atmosphere here is a bit oppressive. I need to go home and rest." Fu Qian's tone was as matter-of-fact as if he needed to urinate urgently. An exploration mission led by President Li Weishuan himself, something countless people can't even beg for, and yet you want to go home. The smile on the middle-aged man's face turned cold. "If that's really the case, you don't need to worry anymore, because soon I will be sending you on your way." You can, of course, try to run, or you could pull out your arrow bell to see if President Li Weishuan can come to save you in time. Arrow bell. Fu Qian thought for a moment. He had overheard his team members chatting about it earlier. It was a survival tool provided by the academy for each student venturing out, similar to a flare gun used for signaling distress. Since many forbidden areas render communication devices completely ineffective, in a life-or-death predicament, one can activate it to seek help and mutual support. No need, I don't have to call anyone for now. Fu Qian waved his hand dismissively and, frowning at the middle-aged man, asked the question that he was truly concerned about. What weapon are you planning to use to kill me? What weapon? The middle-aged man was visibly confused, his expression screaming, "Are you insane? Aren't you interested in why I want to kill you?" "I'm not interested, and are you sure the one you want to kill is actually me?" Getting no response, Fu Qian sighed. "What do you mean?" The middle-aged man's eyes hardened. "Just guessing, but from the moment I left the group, you followed me all the way here. There were countless opportunities to strike, yet you chose to follow me to this remote place. Now you want to make your move, not through ambush but by boldly showing yourself, telling me I'm about to die, almost as if you're intentionally creating pressure to make me run. You even reminded me that I could use the arrow bell to call for help. These actions don't seem like those of an assassin. Is your actual target still deeper within the ruins? Are you trying to create a diversion? You hope to drive me as far away as possible, then use the arrow bell to attract President Li Weishuan so he comes to rescue me, and you take the opportunity to go back and eliminate your real target. Interesting, then why don't you guess who my target is?" The middle-aged man's voice was suppressed, seemingly acknowledging Fu Qian's speculation. "It's not very difficult to guess. First of all, we've split into 3 teams. You targeted me so quickly, which suggests that it's highly likely that my target is in the same team as you. When you noticed I had left the group, you thought it was a good opportunity and followed me. Apart from me, that team has another 9 people. Judging by your performance, you're clearly very skilled at stealth and assassination. You followed without even President Li Weishuan noticing. Considering President Li Weishuan can't possibly keep an eye on us all the time, you could have easily found an opportunity to kill with a single blow and then escaped. It wouldn't have been much worse than the choice you're making now. But you didn't choose that, indicating that you lack confidence in killing your target with a single strike and worry that escaping from Li Weishuan if he showed up would be difficult, so you need more time to ensure the completion of your mission. With your strength, in our team, who could make you unsure of a one-hit kill? Ji Liu Huang or Yuan Xin? Fu Qian looked at the middle-aged man. The latter's pupils clearly flickered the moment Ji Liu Huang's name was mentioned. I understand now, Ji Liu Huang. Ha ha. The middle-aged man laughed loudly. If it's really as you said, then why do you think I want to kill Ji Liu Huang? That would be a bit difficult for me. That classmate Ji looks very distinguished, probably this is yet another corporate family feud or something similar. Once it gets to these kinds of matters, the appearance of a dog-like assassin like you seems quite natural. Fu Qian's face was expressionless. He really had no interest in these messed-up affairs, yet somehow they always found their way to him. You're asking for death. Under Fu Qian's continuous mockery, the middle-aged man finally lost his composure, uttering a typical line born of embarrassed anger. Killing you myself and then triggering the arrow bell will do just as well. In the next moment, the middle-aged man's figure flickered like lightning, suddenly appearing beside Fu Qian, and noiselessly unleashed a palm strike. A terrifying aura of deadly intent instantly enveloped Fu Qian. Ah, after all that this guy also turns out to be a hand-to-hand fighter. Fu Qian sighed. Wasting my precious time. I was hoping one of these assassins would at least have a divine weapon that I could test against the barrier to see if it could inflict damage. Disappointing. Facing this terrifying strike, Fu Qian swiftly dodged to the side. Since this guy hadn't arrived during the barrier test earlier, he surely wasn't aware that there would be an invisible obstacle here. It would be a waste not to use that. This is also why I kept standing still. Fu Qian's evasive speed clearly surprised the middle-aged man, who hadn't expected to be so cautious yet still misjudged the situation. With his strike missing its mark and just as he thought to change tactics, he ran headlong into some kind of barrier. What is this thing? Looking at the empty space beside him, the middle-aged man was momentarily confused. Before he could regain his senses, he felt a pain in his ribs. A red whip flashed by, spraying a mist of blood. At the same time, a surge of irritability inexplicably rose in his heart. There's something strange about this whip. The middle-aged man braced himself against the invisible barrier, evading the next 2 lashes, and the irritating feeling in his heart lessened slightly. The wound on his ribs was minor. He needed to be careful not to be hit by the whip and try to fight at close quarters as much as possible. Just as this thought crossed his mind, he saw Fu Qian's face close at hand. This guy actually gave up the advantage of ranged combat to engage in close quarters with me. The middle-aged man was momentarily unable to understand Fu Qian's actions, but then he felt a sharp pain in his ribs as if something had penetrated the wound, branching into countless fine threads that intertwined deeply with his internal organs. The next moment, heat erupted violently, and amidst a sky filled with blood light, his body fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 37, Chapter 37, Chapter 36 Li Weishuan _1. Chapter 37, Chapter 36 Li Weishuan _1. This visceral critical strike is really handy. Fu Qian looked at the body on the ground, then glanced at his own right hand. Just now, he took the opportunity when the middle-aged man crashed into the barrier, decisively closed in, and used the visceral critical strike through the wound created by the whip. The result was that this transcendent of at least the 6th phase was killed with a single blow. His abdominal cavity was virtually turned into a grenade blast, empty and barely left with anything inside. This skill can be called terrifying. In terms of power, it's basically the strongest one I have. The only problem is the limitation on its activation. You must be up close. Plus, there's no guarantee that some transcendents of a higher phase can still jump around happily even without their internal organs. Fu Qian shook his head and flicked his hand toward the position of the barrier. Several drops of blood bead shot out from his hand, hit the barrier, and splattered into mist, leaving not a single trace behind. It's impossible to leave any trace. Fu Qian picked up the middle-aged man's body, tidied up the scene, and erased all traces. All right, now I can go shake people down. There's not much else to do here. With so many people inside, there's no reason not to make use of them. After cleaning up the scene, Fu Qian quickly returned the way he came, and before long, he heard voices ahead. Looking into the distance, it was indeed Ji Liu Huang and the others. Compared to when he left, this elite squad looked much more disheveled, with almost everyone carrying injuries. Apart from these 9 people, there was one more person dressed in black brocade, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, noble in appearance, and a sword hanging at his waist. This standard look of a master. Could it be the legendary 4th phase pinnacle, the impulsive transcendent with divine swordsmanship, Li Weishuan? During the recent break, most of the discussion in the group had been about this deputy dean leading the team. Fu Qian had passively heard quite a lot about his great deeds and could tell that he was the idol of many. Now seeing him in person, his reputation was indeed well-deserved. Li Weishuan looked to be only in his 40s, with a calm demeanor and piercing gaze, like a heavy sword that had been refined 1,000,000 times, sharp and heavy, blending hardness and softness. No wonder that assassin brother was so persistently trying to lure the tiger away from the mountain. There was no chance head-on. This must be the most formidable transcendent I have encountered so far. A 4th phase pinnacle, terrifying as such. At this moment, the group on the other side was also uniformly staring at Fu Qian. He's back. Among them, Yuan Xin frowned and pointed at Fu Qian, his expression somewhat unfriendly. Were they discussing me just now? I'm back. Fu Qian ignored everyone's strange expressions and greeted his teammates very naturally. Li Weishuan turned his head and gave Fu Qian a look. Where did you go just now? I was scouting the situation. You were scouting on the way here. Someone in the team already scoffed at that. With your scouting, did you find anything? Li Weishuan, however, didn't show much reaction and kept his eyes on Fu Qian. Yeah, I was just about to discuss it with everyone. Fu Qian remained calm. We can't get out. What do you mean? I mean just what I said. Fu Qian gestured with his hand. The way we came is now blocked by an invisible barrier. We're like grasshoppers in a glass bottle. As soon as these words were spoken, the whole room was shocked. What nonsense are you talking about? Make a serious excuse if you're going to make one. Yuan Xin's face was already filled with anger. It was one thing for this guy to flee in the midst of battle, but now. He was spouting nonsense again. In fact, not just him, the others reacted the same way, especially the one whose arm had been pricked by hair. Just moments ago, the group narrowly escaped the encirclement, and their arms were still weak and limp. Reflecting on the previous scene, they felt like the butt of a joke. What was hateful was that this guy had known that it was hair all along, yet he stood there watching the fun, and later even abandoned his teammates to run away on his own, an act of utter despicability. Barrier. Li Weishuan didn't burst out with criticism but stared thoughtfully at Fu Qian. You've advanced to the 6th phase. 6th phase. Yuan Xin and his companions almost couldn't believe their ears. When had this guy advanced? They all considered themselves among the best of their peers, but even the strongest, Ji Liuzhuang, had only just touched the threshold of the 6th phase. Yes. Fu Qian had not intended to conceal anything, so he didn't deliberately suppress his aura. It was no surprise that Li Weishuan could see this. Good. Li Weishuan took a deep look at Fu Qian. He didn't know much about this student, but he was aware of what had just happened. Although the monster was bizarre, a 6th phase transcendent would not have fled due to the situation just now. But if what he said was true, take me to see it. The journey there was utterly silent, with Fu Qian leading the way and everyone looking at him with complex expressions. Young people are competitive, and many had been determined to make an impression on Li Weishuan during this activity. Hearing Li Weishuan's tone now, it seemed this unpleasant fellow was almost certainly a genuine 6th phase, which would make him even stronger than Ji Liuzhuang. It's right here. Arriving at the destination, Fu Qian gestured towards the front, signaling for everyone to observe for themselves. An invisible barrier here? I can't see anything at all. All were at a loss, looking at one another. Yuan Xin, with a furrowed brow, stepped forward and pushed against it, then showed a look of disbelief. There really is something. He couldn't help but turn back and shout. After hearing his words, every team member incredulously rushed forward, only to be blocked by the barrier. Some tried to pound it forcefully but to no effect. How could this be? There had been no impediment when they arrived. Li Weishuan did not rush forward immediately, but he could not help frowning at the scene before him. Use weapons. Ji Liuzhuang, at the front, nodded upon hearing this and drew her sword, aiming it towards the direction of the barrier. The rest quickly made room for her. Taking a deep breath, with a serene mind and steady breath, Ji Liuzhuang launched her attack in an instant. A flash of Qing light appeared, swift as a startled swan, her move now even more fierce than before, covering several steps in an instant, and thrusting her sword at the invisible barrier. Not bad. Li Weishuan showed an approving look, as the swordplay, though somewhat immature, had its own conception. However, the attack, fierce as thunder, did not stir a ripple, coming to a halt the moment it touched the barrier, leaving only the vibrating blade to hum. This. All were stunned, the barrier was truly impregnable. Step aside. The voice of Li Weishuan came through, and everyone's gaze hardened as they cleared a path. Finally, it was happening. Fu Qian watched the unfolding scene with satisfaction. He had not pinned his hopes on Ji Liuzhuang and the others from the start, he was waiting for Li Weishuan to make a move. At the peak of the 4th phase, with a divine weapon. This should be the strongest penetrative force that could be found in this ruin. If the barrier could be forcefully breached, then this was certainly one of the most likely options. Chapter 38, Chapter 38, Chapter 37 Aggregate _1. Chapter 38, Chapter 37 Aggregate _1. After everyone deftly cleared the way, Li Weishuan drew his sword from his waist. As a 4th phase pinnacle swordsman, his actions were far from ordinary. The sword sang like a dragon's cry as he unsheathed it. There wasn't a dazzling sword light, nor was it as fast as lightning as one might expect. The tip of Li Weishuan's sword seemed to carry a heavy mountain, slowly extending towards the barrier. At that moment, everyone seemed to hear the roaring of the heavens and the earth. After the roar, sword energy surged everywhere, and those close by were even thrown off by the violent gusts. Everyone instinctively looked towards the tip of the sword. This. On the invisible barrier, there still wasn't any crack, not even the slightest tremble. This indomitable strike still did not evoke any reaction. How could this be? Crack. A series of crisp sounds followed, and the long sword in Li Weishuan's hand first showed a spiderweb of cracks, then shattered into fragments the size of fingernails. The might of a single sword was such that even the sword itself couldn't withstand it. Even such an attack wasn't enough to break the barrier. Are we going to be trapped here to die? Everyone exchanged glances, feeling an uncontrollable sense of despair rising within them. Could it really be impossible? Fu Qian sighed on the side. Although he subconsciously felt that it shouldn't be so simple, the fact that such a terrifying blow left no trace was still shocking. It almost certainly meant that the barrier could not be force-broken, and another method needed to be found. Li Weishuan, however, stared at the broken sword in his hand, momentarily dazed. Since his debut, he had never encountered such a bizarre incident. Try the top. At this moment, someone in the team shouted. Right. There was still the top. This reminder awakened many, as the barrier might not cover every direction, perhaps they could bypass it from above. Someone in the team had a bow and arrows, and immediately took them out to fit the bowstring and draw an arrow, aiming it upwards. Fu Qian stood by, quietly observing the changes without telling them that he had already tried with their bullets. It never hurt to try more. Crack! As expected, after the pricey arrow was released, it flew upwards at an angle, only to crash into some invisible barrier and break into several pieces. The looks in everyone's eyes quickly dimmed. The archer paused, then drew another arrow, trying a different direction. Still met with the same barrier. Another arrow. Until the quiver was empty, finally someone stepped forward and held the archer's trembling hands. The ground was littered with broken arrowheads. The only finding was that the barrier extended from the boundary upwards, growing higher, roughly dome-shaped like an arc. By this time, Li Weishuan had regained his senses. This exploration and training could not continue. He was about to give orders when suddenly a series of crisp bell sounds came from a distance. Follow up. Everyone was startled, and Li Weishuan briskly commanded, already the first to rush out. That was the arrow bell unique to the academy, used by students in distress seeking help during outings. There were still 2 teams in the ruins. Watching Li Weishuan's retreating figure, the students also hurriedly followed suit. Unable to get out, with strange monsters inside, following directly seemed like the safer bet. Thank you. As she passed by Fu Qian, Ji Liuzuang tilted her head and softly expressed her gratitude. If it hadn't been for Fu Qian's warning, perhaps no one would have realized that the team had already been ensnared in a hopeless situation. Though they were still clueless now, being prepared in advance was always good. Fu Qian nodded without speaking, genuinely feeling deserving of the thanks. After all, he had casually dealt with an assassin for her. The others weren't as free and easy as Ji Liuzuang, feeling some resentment towards Fu Qian from earlier encounters, genuinely finding it difficult to lower their pride to thank or apologize, especially for a bunch of 20-somethings. Luckily, with Li Weishuan's orders at hand, the group promptly got moving, straining to run forward, subconsciously wanting to distance themselves from Fu Qian. Regrettably, they soon despaired to find that no matter how fast they ran, Fu Qian was always right there, showing no signs of falling behind. They had forgotten that this guy was a 6th phase transcendent. The spectacle before them finally made them realize this. Fu Qian was now a genuine middle-tier powerhouse, and they were foolish to think they could leave him behind. That would have been absurd. Fortunately, the distance wasn't very far, and the awkward journey quickly came to an end. When the group arrived, they saw the almost divine Li Weishuan making sword gestures with his hand, sending dozens of sword energies in all directions toward a hand. Indeed, Li Weishuan's target was an enormous palm, on which grew densely packed dozens of fingers. Surrounded by numerous fingers, the palm moved with lightning speed, each finger acting like a spear, extending and retracting, sending rocks flying in disarray. Li Weishuan's invincible sword energies almost instantly severed a bunch of fingers, tearing open appalling wounds. Despite the severe damage, the palm trembled violently but no blood flowed. Sensing Li Weishuan's prowess, the remaining fingers scurried across the ground, quickly hiding among the rocks and vanishing in the blink of an eye. So disgusting. The creature's form had a mental impact on everyone, and it was only when Li Weishuan landed from the sky that they all snapped out of it. The endangered team was another group. Sadly, their luck wasn't as good as the first team's, and by the time Li Weishuan arrived, 2 members had already been killed by that palm. Cease action, everyone regroup, send a signal for the remaining team to come over. In the face of this scene, Li Weishuan's expression was as stern as iron as he swiftly issued the order. Things were getting more and more out of hand. A routine exploration had resulted in casualties. The finger monster was only severely injured, not yet dead. Of course, the most terrifying predicament was not this, but something outside. Li Weishuan immediately went to check on the wounded. In the short time while he did this, someone had already informed the attack team about being trapped. The entire ruin was deadlocked by a barrier that couldn't be opened at all. The morale of the ambush team, which had just improved, plummeted again. We were resting when that hand suddenly burst out. Senior brother Wang was killed on the spot. We tried everything to hold it off and managed to send out the arrow bell. A wounded girl quickly described the situation at the time. It's not just a hand, to be precise, it should be described as a collection of arms. Fu Qian threw something he was holding onto the ground. It was one of the fingers Li Weishuan had cut off. Some had rolled down the cliff, others were scattered on the ground. Fu Qian had immediately run over to investigate and had found something interesting. Here, take a close look at the tip. You're twisted. The group was startled for a moment before realizing what he had thrown onto the ground, and they all jumped in shock. That disgusting thing, you almost threw it onto someone. This is an arm, not a finger. Ji Liushuang's expression severe, she spread apart the tangled mass, allowing everyone to clearly see the true nature of the object. What they had thought was a gigantic finger turned out to have another 5 fingers at the tip. These 5 fingers were the size of those of an ordinary person, only now shriveled like chicken claws. Bleh. Finally, someone couldn't hold back and vomited. Chapter 39, Chapter 39, Chapter 38, The Road to Survival _1. Chapter 39, Chapter 38, The Road to Survival _1. The first student to break couldn't hold back any longer, unleashing a chain reaction of retching sounds that filled the air. Fu Qian stood emotionlessly nearby, looking thoughtfully at the pointing hand on the ground. Last time, we encountered hair. Ji Liushuang whispered, approaching Fu Qian. Just moments ago, she had only heaved a few times without actually vomiting, but now her complexion was still pale. However, a beauty is still a beauty. Even in such a state, she lost none of her charm and even seemed more pitifully adorable. Fu Qian nodded. It's very likely. He replied, knowing what Ji Liushuang was hinting at. Hair, limbs, they were all parts of a human body. In fact, Fu Qian had suspected from the beginning that these items were probably from a real human body. Considering the ruins around them, it was clear that this place had existed for many years. Even if this area was seldom visited, it was unlikely that no one had stumbled upon it for such a long time. The characteristic of being able to enter but not to leave meant that the accumulations inside would only grow over time. Yet, having entered the ruins for so long, they hadn't encountered a single living creature. While it could be explained that all who entered were trapped and perished, the absence of any corpses made it rather eerie. The appearance of these 2 types of monsters inevitably led to wild speculations. Ji Liushuang realized this, and felt that they might be related to people who had previously trespassed here. Actually, Fu Qian had already guessed something similar when he first saw that clump of hair. He remembered clearly, 1-003, the Angel of Comfort's containment conditions were to escape the crucible. The crucible undoubtedly referred to the ruins within the entire barrier, but this nickname was quite intriguing. Like a crucible used in refining, except the subject wasn't minerals, but the living beings that wandered in. If this guess were true, it would explain some of the situations they had encountered so far. In fact, Fu Qian had already arranged a method to verify his theory. As he pondered with his head down, Fu Qian felt an unfriendly gaze directed at him. Looking up, he saw that it was Yuan Xin, who had always been quite proactive, staring at him with a hint of hostility. Ah! It took Fu Qian half a second to understand the reason. Even a blind man could see that Yuan Xin was very attentive to Ji Liushuang. As 2 of the team's main powerhouses, they had always communicated a lot, and many issues were nearly always decided by their discussion. This time, Ji Liushuang suddenly speaking to him seemed to have made Yuan Xin feel slighted or neglected. Especially since Fu Qian, originally a peripheral figure in the group, had just received an official 6th phase certification. It was understandable that he might have such a look. But understanding aside, Fuqian had no interest in catering to the kind of hostility spurred by a mating season urge toward all potential competitors. Being influenced by hormones was one thing, but an ambitious young man should learn to self-regulate, especially one who seemed older than Fuqian himself. Hence, Fuqian had no intention of keeping his distance, and continued to converse with Ji Liuzhuang, undisturbed. From a distance, Yuan Xin's expression twisted gradually. Meanwhile, sounds came from not too far away, and a group of people rushed over. It was the third team arriving. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fuqian glanced over and saw that the team was still intact and seemed unharmed. They must have been lucky not to have encountered any attacks. The person running at the front of the team was a long-haired young man who, at first glance, appeared extremely frail, as if a gust of wind might blow him over. However, his movements were agile as he wove through the rugged terrain effortlessly. Director Li. The newcomer halted and scanned the crowd. Upon spotting Li Weishuan, he promptly greeted him. But Fuqian was quick to notice that this person had obviously hesitated for a moment when he saw Ji Liuzhuang. It looked like he was quite surprised to find Ji Liuzhuang here. If he remembered correctly, the one who had sent the signal to the third team also used an arrow bell. Could he have misunderstood something? Fuqian seemed to have an idea of who had called upon the assassin. This guy, after seeing the signal, probably thought that the assassin had succeeded and rushed over to confirm. Only to find Ji Liuzhuang perfectly unharmed, hence his shocked reaction. If his guess was right, it was hard to imagine what kind of deep hatred could drive someone to directly attempt to kill a classmate. Of course, this person would never expect that the assassin he had arranged was now missing and wondered why there had been no action. Women are usually keenly aware of other people's gazes, and Ji Liuzhuang seemed to have also sensed that there was something unusual about the way the man looked at her. However, she definitely could not have figured out the reason. Director Li, the sudden succession of arrow bells, has something happened? The long-haired young man looked at Li Weishuan with some confusion. The mission is cancelled. From now on, no one is to act on their own. Li Weishuan addressed the gathered students. These were the Academy's treasures, almost comprised of all the elites of this phase. There's potential danger inside these ruins. 2 teams have already been attacked, and we've lost 2 students. And that's not even the worst news yet. As a shiver swept through the group, Li Weishuan added another line. Quickly, Li Weishuan explained the situation with the barrier to the members of the third team and proposed his plan. Moving forward, I need you to split into 2 teams. He gestured with his hand. Currently, the outskirts of the ruins seem relatively safe. You will explore along the edge of the barrier in 2 directions to check for invisible gaps and to roughly figure out the overall layout of the ruins. If the barrier truly has no gaps, then we should eventually converge at a single point. Soon, the group, led by Li Weishuan, arrived at the edge of the barrier. All the injured will be in my team, and the rest of you will form another team. Signal immediately if you encounter threats that you can't deal with. After organizing, the long-haired young man approached with a sly smile. You'd better not get in the way later. Yuan Xin, who clearly did not welcome him and was already in a bad mood, was quite rude. Don't worry, I definitely won't get in your way when you're off to meet your demise. The young man named Huang Xiaoyan, however, was not afraid of him and simply scoffed. It was evident that the 2 of them did not get along well normally. We're at a critical moment for our lives, and I do not want any conflicts within the team. Regardless of your status outside, I won't be polite. Li Weishuan looked at Yuan Xin and the others with a cold expression, delivering a rather stern warning. The clearly upset director at the pinnacle of the 4th phase was already radiating a subtle murderous intent. No matter their differences, Yuan Xin and Huang Xiaoyan did not dare to act out in such a situation and nodded their agreement earnestly. Chapter 40, Chapter 40, Chapter 39 Bizarre Great Fisher _1. Chapter 40, Chapter 39 Bizarre Great Fisher _1. The area of the furnace ruins was even larger than imagined. Fuqian followed behind a line of people, casually surveying the surroundings as if nothing was amiss. He didn't hold much hope for finding a loophole to escape but understood why Li Weishuan arranged things this way. Firstly, even if the chances were slim in this desperate situation, one should not casually give up hope, one still had to try. Secondly, having everyone personally confirm the current predicament could save a lot of talking. Newly joined Huang Xiaoyan clearly did not get along with Yuan Xin and the others, and although he dared not start an open conflict under Li Weishuan's warning, there was a continuous exchange of barbed words along the way. Unexpectedly, Ji Liuzuang actually played the role of a coordinator between the two. Yuan Xin, needless to say, and even Huang Xiaoyan put on an attitude of not wanting to stoop to the other's level for Ji Liuzuang's sake. It was hard to imagine that he would arrange to have Ji Liuzuang killed behind the scenes. From the conversations of the three and those around them, Fu Qian roughly understood that they all came from powerful aristocratic families. Unlike the newly rich Wen Li's family, even young Master Yi could not be compared. They were bona fide transcendent families with a history of over 100 years. The relationships between them were also quite extensive, whether they were fateful or cursed was another matter. And people like Ji Liuzuang were among the best of their generation, selected to be sent to the academy as classmates. Truly complicated interpersonal relationships. Fu Qian had no interest in the grievances among the three. For him, the only thing that mattered was completing the mission and getting out of there. Their plotting and alliances were their business, but if it hindered his own, he wouldn't mind eliminating them together. At first, the group searched the barriers diligently for any weakness, afraid of missing any chance of escape. However, it wasn't long before they lost their enthusiasm, and a sense of despair began to spread, leaving only a mechanical tapping and pounding. After marching continuously for a while, everyone was both physically and mentally exhausted and decided to take a break. Fu Qian had no objection to the rest and, after the group sat down, indicated that he wasn't tired and would go ahead first. Director Li wants us to move together. Yuan Xin stared at Fu Qian with a stern face. I know, you can catch up. Everyone needs rest. So, it's you who can't keep up. Why should we follow you? Maybe. Fu Qian blinked. Because I'm 6th phase. You can follow slowly behind, I don't mind you dragging me down. You. Yuan Xin shook with anger, but the facts were as such, making it impossible to refute. You see, in a world where might makes right, a bigger fist crushes the opposition. Fu Qian turned around, satisfied, and set off on his own under everyone's complicated glances. If he remembered correctly, it wasn't far ahead to the burial site of Assassin Brother. He had something he needed to check out. However, not long after Fu Qian went out, he noticed someone following him. Huang Xiaoyan actually hadn't stopped to rest but followed him cautiously. Had this guy sensed something unusual, or had he come out to meet with Assassin Brother? Both were possible since, if they were truly trapped inside, they would eventually meet, and it would be quite awkward if anything was exposed. But no matter the reason, his arrival was timely. Fu Qian didn't mind the extra tale in the least and continued on his way, quickly finding the place where he had dealt with the body. He didn't hesitate, he directly lifted the steel that was pressing down on the corpse. Hiss! Although he had anticipated it, the scene before him still felt incredibly surreal. The body of Assassin Brother, who had died just a short while ago, had already become a mummified corpse. It was shriveled up all over, without a single drop of blood in sight. Even more bizarre was the fact that the scant hair on the top of his head had, at this point, completely vanished without a trace. Not only that, the entire withered body from head to toe resembled a melting wax figure, displaying an eerie twisted posture, with some parts grotesquely elongated. For example, the skin at both shoulder areas had been stretched near transparent, as if the arms were about to detach from the body. It really is like a furnace here. Fu Qian silently lamented that this place was indeed sinister to the extreme. His previous conjecture was correct after all, every creature that entered here and died was being disassembled by a special rule, then converging into the shapes of those monstrous hair and hands. If he were to come across a block of blood tofu or the like later, Fu Qian wouldn't be surprised in the least. After meticulously observing the scene, Fu Qian immediately stepped away. This time he didn't cover the body with the steel again but instead tossed it aside, not minding if it would be discovered by someone. Fu Qian was quite aware that Huang Xiaoyan was secretly observing from behind a certain building not too far away, and he was curious to see how this brother would react to the corpse. As it turned out, once he left, Huang Xiaoyan quietly approached the body and stood there dumbfounded for several minutes. This guy is truly suspicious, Fu Qian thought to himself as he nodded secretly. What he had just done could not have been more obvious, practically rushing straight to the steel and flipping over the corpse, even a fool could guess that the death of the man was related to him. And he had deliberately made the corpse visible to him. If Wang Xiaoyan felt like a guilty thief, then he would certainly think that Fu Qian knew something, and this display was intentional. Later upon meeting Li Weishuan, if Wang Xiaoyan disclosed that it was Fu Qian who uncovered the body for all to see, it would be somewhat normal. But if he omitted that part and kept quiet, then there was a 99% chance that the assassin was sent by him. Of course, if Wang Xiaoyan was foolish enough to think that since the matter was exposed, he might as well kill someone to silence them, Fu Qian wouldn't mind finishing him off. After all, theoretically, his scheme had arranged for a transcendent assassin to set his sights on Fu Qian, even aiming to put him to death. He who kills must be prepared to be killed. Fu Qian suddenly found himself looking forward to that scene. Unfortunately, after waiting for a while, Wang Xiaoyan was still standing there in a daze, which deeply disappointed Fu Qian, prompting him to leave. Not long after, Fu Qian encountered Li Weishuan and his group, whose complexions were not looking good. The morale of this group had evidently almost bottomed out. Without asking, it was clear they had found nothing. Where are the others? Li Weishuan, seeing Fu Qian alone, furrowed his brows. They needed to rest. I came ahead to scout the area. Fu Qian replied with an air of nonchalance. Li Weishuan was clearly in a bad mood and didn't have the energy to probe into Fu Qian's slight breach of protocol. Did you find any places for entry or exit? No. The somewhat hopeful looks in the group's eyes dimmed further. Li Weishuan clearly hadn't held much hope, nodded to Fu Qian to rejoin the group, and ordered everyone to rest on the spot. After waiting for a while, they saw a large group of people approaching from afar. The person in the lead had long hair fluttering and an elegant gait. He wasn't even close when he shouted out loud. Director Li, we found something. Chapter 41, Chapter 41, Chapter 40 Yes, I killed him _1. Chapter 41, Chapter 40 Yes, I killed him _1. Wang Xiaoyan's shout changed the way everyone looked at Fu Qian. Didn't you say you didn't find anything? You didn't just get lazy and run over here, did you? I did indeed get lazy and came straight here. That kind of futile work is best left to others. Facing the many questioning glances, Fu Qian was calm and composed, without the slightest sense of guilt. They watched as Wang Xiaoyan ran over amidst everyone's expectant gazes. Where is it? Li Weishuan still possessed the bearing of a great leader, his tone only slightly excited. Over there, it'll take about 15 minutes. Wang Xiaoyan turned back and pointed. I found a body. A body. Including Li Weishuan, everyone's eyes dimmed again, their morale dropping by 99. Wang Xiaoyan hadn't yet realized the misunderstanding his words had caused. A very strange body, I think you should take a look. Indeed, he didn't betray himself, and he didn't even glance at my face from beginning to end. Fu Qian sighed inwardly, don't be so guilty. Then let's go take a look. Li Weishuan took a deep breath, hurrying the group that was sitting down. Having a discovery was always good news, at least there was a clue to follow. When the group arrived, they were dumbstruck by the sight of the killer's body for quite a while. The reason was straightforward, it was just too strange. The killer's body was now even more twisted than before, both arms nearly detached, hanging by a mere sinew. Ugh! Fu Qian heard someone retching again. Indeed strange, it must have died not long ago, but the state of this body is very unnatural. Could it be related to the special environment here? Li Weishuan frowned, equally puzzled by the scene before him. Then he suddenly thought of something and turned to Fu Qian. Didn't you come across this body on your way here? Fu Qian glanced at Wang Xiaoyan, who unconsciously averted his gaze. Of course, I did. He nodded, and everyone was shocked. Why didn't you mention it then? What's there to mention? Fu Qian looked surprised, as if everyone was making a fuss over nothing. After all, the person was killed by me. Indeed, no matter how you put it, it's just a strange body, and not a way out. Wait a minute, what did you just say? Everyone was startled, looking at Fu Qian in disbelief. You said, you killed the person. This time even Li Weishuan let out an exclamation, his composure slipping. Yes, I was attacked by this guy while I was out scouting earlier, and I just took care of him. Fu Qian's tone was casual, as if he was talking about tossing out trash on his way to buy soy sauce. Just to clarify, that guy made the first move. I was acting entirely in self-defense. Do you know who he is? No. Fu Qian shook his head, noticing the relieved look on Huang Xiaoyan's face. He just followed me for a while, then suddenly jumped out and said he wanted to kill me, even told me to run fast. He told you he was going to kill you, and then told you to run fast. Yes. He even reminded me to release Arrow Bell to call for reinforcements. Li Weishuan's gaze sharpened. To kill someone, yet to remind the target to seek help. The actions thus far could still be explained, but this one was completely irrational. Li Weishuan glanced subconsciously behind him, realizing the issue wasn't that simple. He wasn't the type of person oblivious to the ways of the world, absorbed only in martial arts. He almost instantly made numerous associations. The true target of this assassin was someone else. Approaching Fu Qian was just a diversion tactic. The fact that someone dared to pull such a stunt during an exploration led by him, it was as if they really thought he was too good-natured. This matter, once it was out, had to be clarified, or where would the Academy's authority stand? Check his possessions. Li Weishuan ordered, then looked deeply at Fu Qian. Don't worry, once we're out of here, I'll give you an explanation. This student might have many secrets, but no one would tell such a pointless lie to bring trouble upon themselves. It's no trouble, this guy is very wet behind the ears. Fu Qian's face was one of casual indifference. That being said, his time of death should be quite recent. Li Weishuan's attention then returned to the corpse. Which makes his current condition quite strange. Indeed, very strange. I already have a hypothesis, which Miss Liu Huang and I arrived at independently after sharing some ideas. Fu Qian spoke as if he had an unspoken understanding with Ji Liu Huang. He definitely did not want all the ideas to come from him, that would be too suspicious. Having already conversed with Ji Liu Huang, it seemed only appropriate for this favorite student of the Academy to come forward and confirm his words. Ji Liu Huang was deep in thought, her brows furrowed, when she suddenly looked up in surprise as Fu Qian mentioned her name. Liu Huang, do you have any thoughts on this? Fu Qian's words took Li Weishuan by surprise. I do have some speculation, which seems to be related to this place. Even though it was strange for Fu Qian to push her to the front, Ji Liu Huang still nodded and shared her deduction. Think about it, ever since we entered here, we've hardly seen any living creatures, and the only corpse was that of an assassin who followed us. For a place you can enter but cannot leave, isn't that a bit eerie? Since our entry, we've encountered two types of monsters, one with black hair, and one made up of a conglomerate of arms, the palm monster, both related to the human body. So I'm wondering if there might be a possibility that, under the influence of some special power within the ruins, the bodies of all creatures that enter here converge after death into those creatures. This. Ji Liuxuang's words clearly struck a chord, creating significant unrest among the crowd. If that's true, could this place actually be alive? We'll be digested in some weird way after we die. Not only can we not get out, but we'll also turn into one of those palm monsters. That's just disgusting. Seeing the chaos unfold, Li Weishuan raised his hand, signaling everyone to calm down. With furrowed brows, if this were true, this place was indeed sinister. I actually think this is good news. Good news. The entire group was shocked, with Ji Liu Huang looking at Fu Qian with a face full of horror. How could this be good news? Was it merely to satisfy his morbid curiosity? Fu Qian pointed at the body on the ground. Have you considered what it means that he's missing so many parts? What could it mean? Apart from being eerie and bloody, what else could it indicate? Up to now, we've seen hair, arms, but we haven't seen any blood. Fu Qian counted on his fingers. This suggests. He pointed toward the depths of the ruins. Inside the ruins, there's a special place where these things go. Whether it exists in some form or not, it might be fraught with danger, but it's still better than here where there are no clues to follow. That's why I think we should take a look inside. Chapter 42, Chapter 42, Chapter 41 You haven't realized the severity of the problem _1. Chapter 42, Chapter 41 You haven't realized the severity of the problem _1. It sounds easy when you put it like that, but we're talking about serious dangers here, people can die, you know. We've already had casualties just by encountering two monsters outside, and now you're suggesting we delve further in. Fu Qian's words quickly stirred up a strong reaction, or rather a strong opposition. Heading deeper into the ruins. Li Weishuan pondered for a moment before looking at Ji Liu Huang and the others. What do you think? If we don't want to just sit around waiting for death, venturing further inside to find a way out is the only choice. Unexpectedly, Ji Liu Huang's stance was surprisingly firm. And the sooner the better, while most people are still in good shape. If we delay, it's just a slow march to death. This one's really decisive. Fu Qian secretly praised her in his mind. But isn't the risk too high? Right then, Yuan Xin suddenly chimed in. This ruin is full of weirdness everywhere. We have no idea what we might encounter inside, diving in headfirst is just reckless. Sticking to his guns, is he opposing the goddess on purpose? Fu Qian looked at Yuan Xin with interest, only to find the latter giving him a cold stare. I overestimated him, he probably just doesn't like that Ji Liu Huang agrees with my suggestion. We're not at a dead end yet. Some of us are injured, and it might be wiser to rest and recover here for a bit. Huang Xiaoyan quickly agreed. Just because he had conflicts with Yuan Xin on a regular basis didn't mean he was reckless with his life. If we lose contact for a few days in a row, people outside will definitely notice something is wrong. If they send someone to investigate, we can coordinate from the inside and outside to find a solution. The situation is far from that dire yet. Staying here to wait for help in a place where we could encounter any danger the next moment. What are you thinking? Do you have any idea how far the academy is from here? Ji Liu Huang scoffed coldly, retorting without the slightest politeness. Watching the group descend into an argument, Li Weishuan frowned deeply. With boldness born from talent, he was inclined to venture deeper for exploration. However, lives were at stake, and as a qualified leader, he couldn't ignore the opinions of the students and act unilaterally. Idiots. At this moment, Fu Qian shook his head. What do you mean by that? Huang Xiaoyan, who had hardly dared to look at Fu Qian until then, couldn't just stand by after being called an idiot. Have you guys considered one thing? Fu Qian looked around at the group. This place has clearly been here a long time, so why don't you have any information about it? This. Fu Qian's words successfully plunged everyone into deep thought. Indeed, that's strange. Although this place is remote, it's hard to believe that such a dangerous and special location has no rumors or stories attached to it after all these years. Could there be a possibility? Fu Qian looked satisfied with the reactions around him. The moment you entered this place, your existence in the outside world was erased. What? A group of people were shocked, all at once. Is that hard to understand? Then let me ask you, has anyone heard of incidents where people went missing here? To my knowledge, there hasn't been any. Ji Liu Huang's eyes were distant as she murmured to herself. How do we explain that pile of hair and arms we encountered? Judging by those two alone, there must have been numerous victims. So the truth is, once you enter here, all information about your existence in the outside world will be erased, no one will remember you or recognize your presence, whether family, friends, or lovers. Notice, it's not death but erasure, they won't even retain memories of you. Even if there's a wedding photo by your bed, your closest person will still look through you in the photo and wonder why they bought 2 sets of utensils. Fu Qian blinked at Ji Liu Huang. My dear lady, there's a slight possibility that at this very moment, your parents have already forgotten that they ever had a daughter like you. Nonsense, how is that possible? Absolutely preposterous. Alarmist talk, I've never heard of such a thing. Fu Qian's gentle tone painted a picture so chilling that it prompted an instinctive rebuttal from the group. Could it really be so? Ji Liu Huang bit her lip, now thinking that some things indeed did not make sense. In such a bizarre place, everyone had done their homework before setting out but found no information related to it. If it hadn't been deliberately concealed by someone. But if what he said was true. The thought of completely disappearing from her parents' world, without leaving even a trace of memory, was suffocating, even for someone as strong-willed as her. So, give up any pointless fantasies. No one is going to rescue you. Fu Qian added another jab. Unless you run out on your own. Eventually, it was Li Weishuan who was the first to snap back to reality, seeing that the whole group had been silenced. He took a deep breath. This place is indeed eerie. It's no use sitting around waiting for death. From now on, everyone follow me to explore the interior of the ruins. This time, no voices of protest emerged, or rather, no voices were heard at all. Done. Fuqian snapped his fingers, very pleased with the current outcome. After all, for the initial exploration of the interior of the ruins, Li Weishuan, the powerful fighter, was indispensable, so this group had to come. Of course, strictly speaking, what he had just said was still an unconfirmed conjecture. But often, when you provide an explanation for something, however far-fetched, people will inevitably ponder its possibility without any other answers. The more they thought about it, the more terrifying it became. Along the way, the team fell into a gloomy silence, everyone looking listless, morale -99. Fuqian had successfully brought the team's morale to the brink of collapse with his words alone. Li Weishuan wasn't as composed as he seemed on the surface, but as a seasoned expert, he fully leveraged his advantage, transforming his anxiety into rage. Wielding a long sword temporarily commandeered from a student, he led the way, and anything that moved was subjected to a deluge of sword strikes. The mysterious and venomous hair monster, the agile and ferocious palms, creatures that had caused huge trouble for the team before were crushed to pieces under the raging sword energy of a fourth-phase peak master. The efficiency was so high that even Fuqian abandoned the idea of stealing kills. The students behind him grew even more silent, already in a daze, and were now utterly intimidated by the divine might. Under the furious leadership of Li Weishuan, they were almost unstoppable, plunging deep into the interior of the ruins. The inside was even more bizarre than the exterior. Buildings of various types piled up in layers in an unfathomable manner, squeezed together, making it look as crowded as the spring rush, with barely a path to be found, and many places only accessible by rooftops. Besides the hair and hands previously encountered, there was now also a giant white centipede. Upon closer inspection, each segment of the centipede's body was made up of human skulls. The deformed skulls had their mouths wide open, biting down on the top of the next one, stacking and stretching endlessly like that. Chapter 43, Chapter 43, Chapter 42, Blood Puppet _1. Chapter 43, Chapter 42, Blood Puppet _1. Just after Li Weishuan's fierce sword intent turned the skeleton centipede into bone dust, the group's eyes lit up as they realized they had reached the center of the ruins. A gap appeared amidst the crowded buildings here, forming a deep pit. The pit was currently filled with a viscous dark red liquid, resembling decayed and spoiled blood. More exaggerated was the fact that the blood pool was even moving. It pulsated as if alive, the entire blood pool contracting and expanding at a unique frequency, much like a giant slime. As it moved, large and small bubbles continuously emerged, releasing a rotten smell that shot straight to the brain, making one feel as if their brain would rot with a single breath. At last, they knew where all the blood had gone to. It seemed one's imagination still needed further refinement. This thing was far more bizarre than bloody tofu. And even more unexpected, there was actually a person in the middle of the blood pool. This person was extremely tall, but his hair and beard were all white, showing that he was of old age. At the moment he was with his eyes tightly closed, motionless. Surprisingly, not only was his body intact, but his upper body was also spotlessly clean, making a stark contrast with the foul stench below. In the old man's right hand was a long halberd with an exaggerated design. Just by looking at the luster flowing on it, one could tell it was definitely a divine weapon. However, looking closely, one could see that starting from the old man's lower legs, which were soaked in the blood, signs of corrosion had begun to appear, and a dark rust had crept up to his waist. "You all wait here." Li Weishuan dropped the phrase coldly and immediately prepared to go down to investigate. Just at that moment, an anomaly abruptly occurred. A bizarre pulsation appeared in the dark red fluid of the blood pool, and then a vortex formed around the old man. The stench instantly increased tenfold. The vortex's speed accelerated from slow to fast, spinning wildly, and in the blink of an eye, it slithered up the old man's legs, swiftly enveloping his entire lower half. The next moment, the top of the fluid tightened into a cylindrical shape, then trembled like a snake, hoisting the old man high into the air. The old man raised his long halberd high, as if descending from the sky like an executioner about to deliver a death blow. Clang! Accompanied by a streak of fire tearing through the sky, the old man crossed a distance of dozens of meters, and his long halberd smashed hard onto the ground in front of the crowd. Across from him, Li Weishuan, who had remained uninjured thus far, finally had some bloodstains on his body. The old man, failing to make his strike count, once again stood in the air with the support of the blood column. "Stay back." Li Weishuan signaled everyone to retreat. The next moment, sword intent surged and killing energy filled the air. This was the power of the fourth phase pinnacle. Fu Qian clicked his tongue in praise, yet his eyes were fixed on the old man opposite to him. The momentum behind that single halberd attack was truly terrifying. If it hadn't been for Li Weishuan blocking it, the exploration team would have either died or been injured. Unfortunately, the attacker, who launched that strike, still hadn't opened his eyes, his movements stiff, as if a dead man. Is that thing attached to his lower body the real entity after all? Fu Qian looked at the clump holding up the old man. Now that mass had entirely transformed into the shape of a snail, with most of the dark red fluid absorbed into its body, revealing a circular dome at the bottom of the pool. The old man must have been standing on that just before. While everyone's attention was drawn to the battle, Fu Qian quietly walked to the edge of the pool. There was something he had wanted to do for a long time. He was sure of his deduction, having watched all the way up to now. The people who entered the crucible had their flesh and blood refined by special rules, then they were transformed into various twisted monsters. Clearly, this blood pond is one of those products. So the question arises, why was the old man unaffected? It seems he has been here for quite some time. When things are abnormal, there must be demons, only those not governed by the rules have a chance to get out. Looking at the dark red water of the pond, Fu Qian cut a wound on his arm, then inverted his palm, allowing his blood to flow into it. Logically speaking, once blood leaves the body, it becomes lifeless and should be absorbed quickly. However, unexpectedly, the blood Fu Qian let into the pond not only didn't blend in but actually floated on the surface, like oil and water, refusing to mix. Does this mean I am also unaffected? Fu Qian's eyes lit up. Do I have anything in common with this elder? Other than us both being male. As Fu Qian was frowning in thought here, he suddenly noticed a change in the blood in the pond. As if drawn by some force, the blood floating on the surface of the blood pond began to move. Quickly, the pool of fresh blood stretched into a line, flowing towards the direction of the old man suspended in midair. It can also do this. Fu Qian watched with wide eyes as the bloodline followed the pillar of blood from the lower half of the old man's body, eventually disappearing at the old man's waist. Because the color contrast was not obvious, no one else but him noticed this detail. At this time, the fight between the two reached its climax. Although the old man possessed immense strength and a divine weapon, he appeared to be just a puppet, lacking flexibility in his movements. Under Li Weishuan's relentless assault, the old man quickly fell into a disadvantage, now desperately holding on. Li Weishuan seemed to realize that the pillar of blood beneath the old man was the real body, so he aimed every strike at the lower half, causing blood and viscera to splash and flow everywhere. With one final rip through the lower blood pillar of the old man, his entire body shuddered and he groaned, opening his eyes. He began to struggle fiercely, and, just before the blood pillar could seal back up, he managed to break free, leaping to the shore. Thank you for helping me escape from that nightmare. Kneeling and gasping for air, the old man's eyes showed a human's light for the first time. I never imagined such a day would come. The old man spoke slowly. His voice hoarse and unpleasant, as if he hadn't spoken for a long time. Seeing this, Li Weishuan also ceased attacking but still watched him warily, issuing the soul's triple inquiry. Who exactly are you? Why are you here? What is this place really? I am. The old man, clutching the long halberd, slowly stood, frowning in contemplation, his face showing a pained expression. I can't remember, I only remember being trapped somewhere, unable to escape no matter what. Monsters everywhere, my thoughts growing more and more chaotic, sometimes even feeling like I was already dead. Hold on a second. All of a sudden, as if the old man had discovered something, he pointed at the academy students' chests, his face trembling. Are you from the academy? You know about the academy. Quite a few students had the academy's emblem on their chests, now it was their turn to be taken aback. Remember? I clearly know that I am the fourth headmaster of the academy. I remember now. Before the academy's people could express their shock, the old man's demeanor suddenly became solemn, his long halberd striking the ground. My name is Feng Yunhong. Chapter 44, Chapter 43 They realized the severity of the problem _1. Chapter 44, Chapter 43 They realized the severity of the problem _1. Feng Yunhong. Li Weishuan's expression grew solemn. That's right, I believe you must have heard this name. The old man sighed with the vicissitudes of life, a face suggesting a false reputation was not worth mentioning. All illusory fame is like passing clouds and smoke. Sorry, never heard of it. Li Weishuan shook his head. Not just him, everyone made the same motion. What? Feng Yunhong's expression instantly became quite interesting. And I am quite sure that the Academy's fourth-generation president did not bear that name. Nonsense, I was president when you probably weren't even born yet, what do you know? Feng Yunhong's eyes filled with anger. That is true, seas change into mulberry fields, not knowing about things several decades ago is very normal. Li Weishuan spoke in an indifferent tone. But this one point I am very certain about because the fourth-generation president is my grandfather. I am very certain his surname is Li, and right now, he should be on vacation in the southern hemisphere. Li Weishuan observed Feng Yunhong's expression, which was clearly saying, old man, you might want to get your brain checked out for staying here too long, you can't even remember your own name. Li. Your grandfather is named Li He. Feng Yunhong's eyes became unfocused as he stared blankly for a long while before suddenly asking Li Weishuan. How do you know? Li Weishuan began, but stopped mid-sentence, subconsciously turning his head to look at Fu Qian. Not just him, all the students did the same, uniformly turning to look at Fu Qian standing in the distance. Finally realizing the seriousness of the issue, Fu Qian nodded at everyone, gesturing towards Feng Yunhong. There, for example. What's called a genius intuition, you see. Although information was quite sparse when making hypotheses at the time, facts have proven that the most terrifying nightmare has come true. What's wrong with you all? Feng Yunhong also noticed something was amiss. Feng, old master. Li Weishuan swallowed. Do you know my grandfather? Need you even ask, when I was president he was always my assistant, that kid was exceptionally talented, especially with a stable and solid temperament, capable of achieving greatness. Feng Yunhong stroked his beard as he reminisced about the past. But to say he was the fourth-generation president is simply preposterous, he didn't even have a full beard at that time, how could we make him president? Li Weishuan took a deep breath and glanced back. This wave of mental shock was terrifying, all the students had a look of confusion in their eyes, the light of hope dissipated. It's actually just like what that guy said. Once you come in here, all information from the outside world is completely erased, no one would remember themselves. No reinforcements will come. Only Fu Qian stood there, still looking at Feng Yunhong with great interest. Old Master Feng, the reality I came to understand might be different from what you think. Li Weishuan gulped and chose his words carefully. My grandfather truly was the fourth-generation president of the Academy, but before him, there was a quite long period when the position was vacant. As for your name, I am sorry, but truly no information about it has been passed down. Seeing Feng Yunhong's expression collapse again, Li Weishuan began to explain while gesturing to Fu Qian to come over. About why it's like this, we have hypothesized a possible reason, let my student explain it to you in detail. After calling Fu Qian over, Li Weishuan quickly retreated to the side to compose himself. Fu Qian floated up, greeted the elder, and repeated his hypothesis about the nature of these ruins. After he finished speaking, not only was the old Mr. Feng stunned there, but the team members who were forced to listen again were even more dispirited, with grey defeat on their faces. What in the world is this cursed place? Mr. Feng, if you don't mind, may I ask a few questions? After giving Feng Yunhong half a minute to digest, Fu Qian spoke again. Go ahead and ask. Feng Yunhong responded in a deep voice, no longer as spirited as before. According to what you said, have you been trapped here for a long time? Yes, it has been many years since that happened. Feng Yunhong lifted his head, his gaze lost. These years, the times I've been lucid have become fewer and fewer. It's difficult to estimate the exact time, but seeing how big Li's grandson has grown, I'm afraid it's almost been 100 years. At first, I couldn't understand why, after being missing for so long, no one ever came looking for me. I never imagined there would be such weirdness in between. So, when you entered here, your strength was already very high, wasn't it? What are you asking this for? Feng Yunhong frowned and glanced at Fu Qian. Back then, I was only at the 5th phase, but after all these years, I've managed to make some progress. It shows. Fu Qian nodded. Then, during this period, have others accidentally wandered in? Too many. You've seen the monsters outside, haven't you? Was anyone as formidable as you? What on earth is this guy trying to do? The surrounding crowd looked at Fu Qian with confusion. Asking a bunch of useless questions, what do you want? Do you expect someone to take you as a disciple or what? Let's not even talk about the issue of seniority. Everyone's trapped here, what use are you if we can't get out? As for masters, there indeed were a few. Feng Yunhong pondered for a moment. However, they didn't last. They were devoured by this place. Understood, thank you for clearing up my confusion. Fu Qian said thanks with a mischievous smile. The next moment, he took a step back and, as he turned around, he took something out and swiftly threw it at Feng Yunhong. Are you insane? The latter's voice was filled with shock and anger. At such a close distance, by the time Feng Yunhong realized it, it was almost unavoidable, he was hit directly. Not just him, including Li Weishuan, everyone was taken aback, not understanding what Fu Qian was doing. Now, they saw clearly what Fu Qian had thrown, it was actually a bloodied finger. It couldn't be his own finger, could it? Had he torn off his own finger to use as a hidden weapon? This guy's mind really wasn't normal. However, in the next moment, everyone froze in place. After the finger hit Feng Yunhong, instead of bouncing off, it pierced straight into his body. Was it really so fragile? Feng Yunhong looked down at the finger that had entered his body, his expression extremely strange. The next moment, the half of the finger still exposed outside melted like candle wax, merging into Feng Yunhong's body without leaving a trace. At the same time, Feng Yunhong's face twisted into an inhuman, distorted smile. This guy really had a problem. Fu Qian clenched the wound where his finger had been, feeling the pain was worth it. The next moment, Fu Qian raised his hands high and shouted a phrase that stuck in his memory. Silly kids, run for it. What? Most people were still immersed in the shocking scene that had just unfolded, completely failing to grasp the meaning of what Fu Qian had shouted. Run where? Feng Yunhong's cold voice came. In the midst of the muffled booming sounds, his massive body exploded into a storm of blood and flesh. An indescribably furious power instantly swept over everything around. Chapter 45, Chapter 45, Chapter 44. Do you know what ambergris is? _1. Chapter 45, Chapter 44. Do you know what ambergris is? _1. Apart from Fu Qian, no one expected Feng Yunhong to launch a surprise attack, especially one that was self-destructive. Li Weishuan bore the brunt of it, unable to avoid it, and was almost immediately engulfed within it. The approaching blood and flesh storm, with its terrifying power that made one suffocate, far exceeded the oppressive force that Feng Yunhong had exerted, sweeping everything in its path with an invincible momentum. Li Weishuan's body shook violently, and in an instant, countless wounds appeared. However, the next moment, an immense sword chi burst forth, clashing with the storm. Knowing there was no hope of escaping, Li Weishuan chose to face the blow head-on. The wild force overflowed, the sword light shattered, and Li Weishuan's body was instantly torn apart. Taking advantage of this slight reprieve, Ji Liu's Huang and others exerted all their strength to escape the reach of the storm. Apart from them, the entire exploration team was annihilated in an instant, exploding into a mist of blood under the impact of the storm. The next moment, the storm receded, leaving a scene smeared with blood. All around the blood pool, a thick mixture of blood and flesh was smeared everywhere, and apart from Li Weishuan, it was nearly impossible to see any intact corpses. Soon, as the storm subsided, thick streams of blood converged and meandered into the nearby blood pool. Fu Qian stood to one side, quietly observing the scene before him, not missing any detail. The blood and flesh mixture flowing into the blood pool once again presented a clear-cut scene. Most of the blood and flesh quickly merged into that stinking clump, while Li Weishuan's broken body was wrapped in fresh blood, slowly dissolving away, and a human-shaped blood shadow slowly took form. So it was. Fu Qian felt that he now understood the state of this furnace. First of all, Feng Yunhong hadn't told the whole truth. Right from the moment he dropped blood into the pool, Fu Qian had his suspicions. Over the years, there surely must have been transcendents of no low realm that fell into this trap. If their deaths were unaffected, then where did their bodies go? The answer was now quite clear. Among the blood mist that had exploded just now, apart from Feng Yunhong's head, there were faces, contorted faces, far more than one. The owners of those blood faces were those transcendents of no low realm. They had indeed been devoured, but not by this furnace, it was by Feng Yunhong. They, just like Li Weishuan now, had all been eaten by this Feng Yunhong. Fu Qian had no doubt that soon, a Feng Yunhong would emerge from within, and Li Weishuan would become one of the many blood faces. As for why Feng Yunhong was capable of doing this, Fu Qian recalled a section about ambergris that he had learned in a fragrance and spice class. It is said that giant squids have tough beaks and radula that are not easy to digest. When eaten by sperm whales, they accumulate in the gastrointestinal tract, stimulating the intestines, and over time the intestines secrete a special waxy substance that encases the remnants, gradually forming ambergris. Every transcendent of a certain strength was an impurity that this furnace could not digest. What they had just seen in Feng Yunhong was the ambergris formed over the years. He was not a person, but a conglomerate of all the remnant residues of those transcendents. When they first encountered him, the clump of flesh beneath his waist was not controlling him but was enveloping him to prevent him from affecting the furnace. Therefore, his loss of sanity at that time was completely an act. Why did this happen? From a distance, Ji Liuzhuang, with blood on her lips, looked dazedly at the bloody scene in front of her. Even the academy's head. She was among the luckiest ones, originally at a distance. After hearing Fu Qian's words, though she didn't quite understand, she subconsciously prepared herself mentally. So when Feng Yunhong blew himself up, she was almost the first to escape the range of the storm, only slightly shaken. Apart from her, only 5 others survived, including Yuan Xin and Huang Xiaoyan. They weren't so lucky. Even though Li Weishuan had given his life for their chance to breathe, without exception, they were all affected by the storm, with the most seriously injured nearly turned into minced meat. The once sizable team, in the blink of an eye, was reduced to a mere few individuals. How did you know? Struggling to get up from the ground, Yuan Xin did not rush to check his injuries. Instead, he stared intently at Fu Qian, word by word he asked. Know what? Fu Qian looked at the other person's face, covered in blood. I knew there was something wrong with him. Yuan Xin pointed toward the direction of the blood pool. From the beginning to the end, it was you who told us we were trapped, told us we couldn't rest, told us to search for an exit inside the ruins. The whole team has been acting according to your arrangements, and this is the result we have ended up with. Tell me, how did you know all of this? Yuan Xin's words brought a momentary silence, then everyone stared at Fu Qian's face, deep in thought. Indeed, on closer inspection, there were quite a few doubtful points. It seemed that this guy had been directing the team's actions all along. And there was his strange behavior just now. Fu Qian's right hand now had only 4 fingers, he had just ripped off his little finger and thrown it onto Feng Yunhong's body. Now is not the time to dwell on these issues, we need to figure out a way to get out first. Ji Liuzhuang stepped forward, staring at Yuan Xin with a stern look, stopping him from continuing. Although she also felt that Fu Qian had many secrets, she didn't believe it was as Yuan Xin had described. Fu Qian's actions were more akin to those of a wholly rational survivor, every move made solely to stay alive. Don't forget that it was Fu Qian who had just reminded everyone to run quickly. Being reprimanded by the goddess of his heart, Yuan Xin, with his eyes red with rage, was no longer respectful as before, but instead looked at her and sneered, unwilling to give in. Humans. Fu Qian sighed inwardly. Often, the only reason some people hate you is that you told them the truth. Even when they are powerless to confront the truth, they often subconsciously want to kill you, as if your disappearance would make the difficulties before their eyes vanish. Fortunately, dealing with such people, Fu Qian had special communication skills. The next moment, the air was filled with murderous intent. The fear of death gripped everyone's hearts. Fu Qian smiled as he looked at Yuan Xin. Are you mistaken about something? Where did you get the idea that I need to answer your questions? At these words, Yuan Xin, who had just been uncontrollable with anger, turned pale as paper. It wasn't just him, everyone had the same reaction, and the room fell silent. Indeed, in these circumstances, did Fu Qian have any obligation to answer any questions at all? Not to mention that aside from him, almost everyone was injured. Even if all 6 people were uninjured, they might not be a match for a 6th phase transcendent. Considering the nature of these ruins, anything that happened within would go unnoticed to the outside world. Having a powerful family was meaningless. If you died here, dead for real, leaving no trace behind, the outside world wouldn't even remember you existed, much less seek vengeance for you. Even the former head of the academy, trapped here for decades, didn't cause the slightest ripple before ultimately turning into this neither alive nor dead state. To Fu Qian, the group was nothing more than meat on a chopping board. If he really wanted to kill, there was nothing that could threaten him. No, he had already killed one person. Remembering the dismembered assassin, the group's hearts sank further. Especially Huang Xiaoyan's. Fu Qian, don't be rash. Ji Liu's Huang also lost color in her face, her voice trembling as she tried to persuade him, extremely worried that Fu Qian might lash out in displeasure. It's okay, I never act rashly. Fu Qian, smiling, walked beside the blood pool, where a humanoid blood silhouette was slowly taking shape. He turned back to look at Ji Liu's Huang. Do you know what ambergris is? Chapter 46, Chapter 46, Chapter 45, The Struggle _1. Chapter 46, Chapter 45, The Struggle _1. What is ambergris? Fu Qian's question made Ji Liu's Huang freeze on the spot. I of course know what ambergris is, but I don't understand what you mean. Ji Liu's Huang muttered in reply. Fu Qian hadn't expected her to understand. Indigestible foreign substances that are encapsulated are not yet true ambergris. It's only after being expelled by the whale and washed and soaked by the seawater for hundreds of years that it becomes a true treasure. There is a very important point here, which is that the foreign substances will be expelled. If we can't break through the barrier of the furnace, then let it expel us as if we were foreign substances. Maybe this is a method to escape this desperate situation. But if the furnace is compared to a whale, then to be expelled, one not only needs to be an indigestible foreign substance but also large enough. Fu Qian was highly suspicious that Feng Yunhong had been doing just this over the years. Gradually consuming the transcendents who came after him, accumulating himself as a foreign substance, making the furnace's indigestion worse and worse. Until one day, breaking through that limit. Not understanding is not a problem, as the ancient saying goes, being weak and ignorant are not obstacles to survival, but arrogance is. It's best not to do what you don't understand. Fu Qian winked at Ji Liu's Huang. You will help us, won't you? Unable to grasp the meaning behind Fu Qian's words, Ji Liu's Huang swallowed and spoke quickly. You may be somewhat of an outsider, but I know you are not a bad person. If there is a way to escape, please be sure to tell me. I am willing to pay any price. Fu Qian looked at Ji Liu's Huang's serious face, then at the other 5 people. Apart from Ji Liu's Huang, no one even dared to meet his gaze, although it was clear they were all ears. Sorry, you can't get out. Fu Qian mercilessly shattered the hopes of everyone. Because you are too weak. Also, I might not be a bad person, but I am a mission person. Flashing a smile at Ji Liu's Huang, Fu Qian leaped up, jumping right into the center of the blood pool, where Feng Yunhong had first stood. The blood at the center of the pool almost instantly closed around him. Fu Qian could clearly feel his body being violently washed by the blood, trying to penetrate his body and assimilate him. What about this way? Fu Qian didn't hesitate to thrust his right hand into the blood pool. The wound where his pinky was missing instantly became a conduit, with blood rushing into his body like mad through here. You dare! A frenzied howl echoed throughout, and a person stood up in the blood pool. To call it a person was actually a compliment, more precisely, it was a humanoid monster with limbs and a torso, even its facial features were a blank void. Do you know what you're doing? It was none other than Feng Yunhong's voice. Of course I know, otherwise why would I be doing it with such gusto? Fu Qian cheekily responded to him, and before the astonished eyes of Ji Liu's Huang and the others, he tore off his entire right arm. The flow of blood entering increased several times over in an instant. For a moment, he felt his body swell with surging blood and qi. Stop. Feng Yunhong's voice became more urgent. Do you have any idea how many years I've prepared for this? Looks like you're quite aware of your situation, huh? Fu Qian confirmed his guess, This one had indeed thought of the same method. Turn himself into an indigestible, unbearable substance, and then have the furnace expel him voluntarily. I will never let you ruin my decades of effort. Seeing that Fu Qian not only didn't stop but intensified his attack, Feng Yunhong, out of desperation, also began to absorb faster. But the self-destruction had clearly caused him massive damage, and he was still in the midst of recovery. As soon as the absorption rate increased, his body immediately became unstable, almost unable to maintain human form, forcing him to slow down again. However, even so, relying on his years of accumulation and familiarity, his absorption rate still far exceeded Fu Qian's. His body began to take shape gradually, with organs, muscles, and various details appearing. After confirming that Fu Qian could not pose a real threat to him, Feng Yunhong breathed a sigh of relief. Stupid fool, last time I let you escape, I didn't expect you to come back and fall into your own trap. He glared at Fu Qian. Soon I will personally send you on your way and let you experience what the most extreme pain is like. Facing Feng Yunhong's threat, Fu Qian snorted and remained completely unmoved. It's reminded me, should I strike first to be strong? Fu Qian stepped forward, walking up to Feng Yunhong. Without any skin, the musculature all over his body was clearly visible, even the internal organs could be seen. The blood in the blood pool had already been mostly absorbed by him, making the figure of Feng Yunhong look even taller than before. You dare! In Feng Yunhong's roar of anger, Fu Qian took another step forward, letting the other grab his neck while he left a deep gash on Feng Yunhong's body with his fingers like a knife. However, the next moment, blood gushed out from the wound, healing at a visible rate. Don't waste your effort. Feng Yunhong laughed crazily. Although it's inconvenient for me to move now, as long as I stand in this blood pool, I will absolutely not die. No matter what injuries I receive, they will be rapidly repaired. Is that so? How about this? Fu Qian blinked, reached through the not yet fully healed wound, and launched a visceral critical strike. The blood pool trembled violently beneath his feet, as Feng Yunhong let out a scream that echoed everywhere. As Fu Qian withdrew his hand, a surge of blood spurted from the wound on his body. Stop it. With no skin at all, theoretically his whole body was a wound, a perfect target for organ snatching. Ignoring Feng Yunhong's screams, Fu Qian reached in again for another grab. The 6 people on the shore were now stunned. When they saw Fu Qian jump directly into the blood pool, the group thought he had gone mad and was attempting suicide. But now it seemed he was well prepared and set to the rhythm of killing Feng Yunhong. Watching Fu Qian attack ferociously, causing Feng Yunhong to let out scream after scream, suddenly a figure rushed to the edge of the pool. Huang Zhaoyan. The group was shocked at the sudden advance of this person. Idiots. Huang Zhaoyan looked at the group with a cold sneer and, without hesitation, jumped in. This guy wants a share of the spoils. The group, chided as fools, instantly understood Huang Zhaoyan's intentions. Clearly, absorbing the fresh blood in the center of the pool could enhance strength, and with Feng Yunhong and Fu Qian fighting intensely without any spare attention, Huang Zhaoyan was attempting to step in. Although dangerous, in such a place, a bit more strength was a bit more assurance of survival, and upon reflection, it was worth it. The reason for calling the others fools was also simple. If they were allowed to continue, no matter who eventually won, those left would be like lambs to the slaughter. Suddenly, the crowd became restless, and shadows leaped forward, rushing towards the center of the blood pool. Chapter 47, Chapter 47, Chapter 46 I only fight for the present day _1. Chapter 47, Chapter 46 I only fight for the present day _1. This. For a moment, even Ji Liu's Huang almost couldn't help charging forward. However, a voice that flashed through her mind restrained her impulsive behavior. Do you know what ambergris is? It's best not to do things you don't understand. The words Fu Qian had said hammered in Ji Liu's heart, causing her to hesitate for a moment, merely watching as the others rushed toward the blood pool. The next instant, she was immensely grateful for her moment of hesitation. Charging at the forefront were the strongest, Huang Zhaoyan and Yuan Xin, among whom Huang Zhaoyan, being the least injured, leaped high into the air almost like Fu Qian, aiming directly for the center of the pool. However, just as he was mid-leap, a spinning tentacle suddenly shot out from the surrounding putrid, foul-smelling liquid of the blood pool. Ah! Amidst screams, Wang Xiaoyan couldn't avoid it and was pierced through the calf by the tentacle. The next instant, as the tentacle retracted, Wang Xiaoyan was dragged down, buried into the putrid liquid. This scene left Yuan Xian, who was following close behind, utterly shocked. As he hesitated whether to advance or retreat, the next moment he discovered two tentacles shooting toward him. Despite dodging the tentacles' attack with all his might, Yuan Xian lost his balance, and half of his body toppled into the pool. The blood pool was not deep, and Yuan Xian tried to stand up by pushing against the ground with his hand, only to find that seemingly countless tendrils within the liquid were firmly gripping his body, rendering him immobile. The three who had originally waded through the water froze for a moment, and the next instant they frantically tried to retreat, only to find they too could no longer move. In an instant, all five were trapped. "Save me!" Yuan Xian, having fallen on the outskirts of the blood pool, desperately looked towards Ji Liuzhuang, who was still on shore. He could already feel the sensation around his wounds rapidly fading, the fear of death swiftly enveloping his heart. In the corner of his eye, he saw Wang Xiaoyan completely submerged by the liquid. Watching the tragic scene unfold before her, Ji Liuzhuang, who had narrowly escaped death, felt weak in her hands and feet, her heart pounding wildly. She couldn't help but look back at Fu Qian in the blood pool. His words were hinting at me. He had everything planned out in advance, even anticipating this scenario. Everyone's reactions were within his expectations. As the people in the pool began to fall one by one, listening to the wails of the crowd, Ji Liuzhuang's heart softened, intending to rescue them. If you don't understand something, you shouldn't do it. But the words of Fu Qian surged in her mind once more, leading her to ultimately turn her head away. In the blood pool, Fu Qian glanced over only to shift his gaze away immediately. He had not the slightest sympathy for these people. There's no cure for idiocy. It's true that humans have a survival instinct and it's understandable to do whatever it takes to live, but that doesn't mean you can do so without thinking. Not understanding the true logic, blindly imitating is tantamount to gambling with your life. What makes you think that just because these things on the periphery didn't react to me, they would not strike at you? At this time, he had already used Visceral Critical Strike 3 times in quick succession on Feng Yunhong, causing the latter to bleed profusely. Yet, this only served to delay Feng Yunhong's regeneration. As proven, he was right, as long as he wasn't here, his health was infinite. Go to hell. By now, Feng Yunhong had gradually regained his mobility, and his counterattack followed. Squeezing Fu Qian's neck with insane force, Fu Qian felt a crunch sound as the bones in his neck turned to a mess. Then, in the blink of an eye, the surging qi and blood in his body repaired the bones. It's a pity, I seem to have infinite health as well. This feeling is truly magical. However, Feng Yunhong's absorption rate was obviously still far superior to his own, which definitely wouldn't work in the long run. Fu Qian thought for a moment, then the fourth Visceral Critical Strike changed direction, stabbing into his own body. Boom. It felt like his body was hollowed out. The indescribable agony hit him, and Fu Qian's body paused momentarily. Feng Yunhong paused briefly, then began laughing heartily. You want to put an end to your suffering with suicide? Keep dreaming. Now, even death is not up to you. You don't know shit. Fu Qian snorted. This is called the Desperate Vengeance Strike. The next moment, the massive wound on his body crazily tore through his surroundings, forming a true gaping maw of blood. This scene seemed all too familiar. Fu Qian let out a sigh and swallowed everything around him in one gulp. The fresh blood nearby was directly halved. You're insane. Feng Yunhong was both shocked and furious. You can't digest it like this, you'll only blow up and die, it won't be long before you're finished. No need to remind me, I'm already feeling it. Fu Qian grimaced in agony. Unlike before, when he absorbed through the wound, this time he swallowed it whole, instantly filling his body with chaotic blood flow, and his head was bombarded with countless noise. But that's not important. He squeezed out a smile at Feng Yunhong. To triumph as the underdog, one needs to be adept at using every advantage they have. For instance, the phrase, before long. It means nothing to me. I couldn't care less about what's going to happen to me then. But you can't afford that. Enduring the pain that felt like his body was about to burst, Fu Qian swallowed another large mouthful of fresh blood under Feng Yunhong's horrified gaze. He was also busy with his hands, delivering another visceral critical strike to him. As one waned, the other waxed, causing Feng Yunhong's condition to decline swiftly. "You, madman!" In the end, amidst Feng Yunhong's desperate curses, Fu Qian's final visceral critical strike reverted him back to a blood form. No. Feng Yunhong only managed to get halfway through his scream before being swallowed whole by Fu Qian. It was over. Fu Qian slumped to the ground, the remaining trickle of blood continuously entering his body, mending his wounds, and even reattaching his severed arm and fingers. Of course, that was just on the surface. Inside, his chaotic blood was almost out of control, forcefully surging in all directions by instinct, making him feel as if his body was swelling up and ready to explode any second. But that was enough. Even if internally he was a mess, Fu Qian could still feel his state more exaggerated than ever before, his life force stronger than Li Weishuan's had been. He could even feel his very existence being rejected, the space around him becoming viscous. Indeed, a strength built solely on blood energy had surpassed the limits of the crucible. Next, all he needed to do was to reach the barrier to verify if his thoughts were correct. With his body parts grossly out of sync, Fu Qian struggled to his feet. Ha ha ha. Just as he was about to set off, a voice laughed wildly in his ear. Yes, quite literally in his ear. Fu Qian could distinctly feel a mouth had formed under his left ear, emitting Feng Yunhong's voice. "You maniac, you'll never be able to eradicate me. All I need to do is wait for you to explode and restart the rebirthing process, while you will soon completely perish, body and soul." Not just him, dozens of deranged voices laughed from all over his body. There were men and women, likely those transcendents who had been devoured by Feng Yunhong. My rash swallowing act seemed to have improved their condition considerably. It seems residing in this form for too long does indeed affect one's mind. All right, I've got it, you don't need to repeat yourself so many times. Fu Qian said wearily. What if I make it out of the barrier in the meantime? Instantly, both Feng Yunhong's voice and the voices in his mind fell silent. So, we would all perish together, wouldn't we? Fu Qian walked on, laughing. That really would be wonderful. Chapter 48, Chapter 48, Chapter 47 Dark Knight Liuzhuang_1. Chapter 48, Chapter 47 Dark Knight Liuzhuang_1. Are you, alright? As Fu Qian struggled to climb ashore, Ji Liuzhuang asked with trembling caution. Fu Qian understood this very well. Anyone's reaction would be far from calm upon seeing a fellow swollen to several times their size and covered in mouths. Great. His relaxed tone provoked a barrage of curses. Making empty boasts, your death is near, you'll be utterly destroyed, haha. Idiot, you're squandering our last chance. Young man, don't be rash. Who are they? Ji Liuzhuang instinctively stepped back, recognizing Feng Yunhong's voice among the others. You can collectively call them seniors, though it's hard to say if they are esteemed. The cursing suddenly doubled. Can you save them? Seemingly gaining some understanding of Fu Qian's situation, Ji Liuzhuang took another step back, then remembered the few people still trapped in the blood pool. Of the arrogant five, Wang Xiaoyan had vanished without a trace, and Yuan Xian's face was only half visible as he was on the verge of suffocating. I can't. Fu Qian refused outright, darkening the expressions of the three still standing, with Yuan Xian struggling in desperation. Are you coming with me? You're taking me out. Ji Liuzhuang's dim eyes lit up instantly. No. Fu Qian shook his head. Giving you the chance to watch me leave. The scenery shifted, and soon the edge of the ruins was clearly in sight. Ji Liuzhuang didn't know what she felt. After Fu Qian said that, she didn't even feel angry and actually followed him all the way out. Perhaps after being in a dire situation for too long, even if it wasn't herself, she wanted to witness something escaping from it. She gave herself a reason. The two of them, one in front of the other, continued on the same path they came in on, even encountering the palm monster that Li Weishuan had wounded and a few lush clumps of hair. But their reactions were odd. Even though they saw the two humans, they just looked from a distance, not daring to approach. It felt like going to court. Fu Qian admired internally, knowing that these things were probably not just afraid of him. More likely, as beings completely assimilated by the furnace, they didn't want to touch something that the furnace itself had rejected. The barrier was now close at hand. the closer he got, the more Fu Qian felt the forces violently struggling inside him. Reversing blood flow was now the least of his concerns, his muscles and bones creaked, chaotic powers almost made walking a problem, and the howling in his head grew louder and louder. Stop, you're truly insane. Young man, don't be too arrogant. Brother, you're still young, don't go down the path of self-destruction. Fu Qian made no reply, his face unchanged as he controlled his body, taking firm steps to the edge of the barrier and extending his right hand. Like touching a layer of thick jelly, the previously impenetrable invisible barrier was easily penetrated. It really works. Fu Qian blinked, turned back, and looked at Ji Liu Huang. The latter was staring intently at his hand that had extended outside, her gaze complex. Any last words? Last words. Upon hearing this, Ji Liu Huang first froze, then lowered her head. Doesn't seem to matter anymore, does it? If it really is as you say, even if I tell you some last words now, once I leave, all information related to me will be erased. You're not dumb. Theoretically. That's true, so the pressure is on you now. Fu Qian looked at her. If you don't want to waste this opportunity, you'll need to think of some last words that I won't forget. Last words that won't be forgotten. Ji Liu Huang was stunned for a moment before her eyes suddenly lit up. Do you know about Silver Mist Manor? I do. Fu Qian nodded and frowned at the same time. Although it was unbelievable, he just knew. As soon as Ji Liu Huang mentioned this place, an image of a majestic building bathed in sunlight naturally emerged in Fu Qian's mind. He was certain that this was the place she was talking about. But the problem is, I've never been there, not to mention I'm not even from this world. Fu Qian thought for a moment and guessed a possibility. That is, his thoughts had already been contaminated by the consciousness of other transcendents, these were their memories. In fact, from a while ago, his head had been filled with a variety of chaotic images, a collection of everything. Now it seems that his current form brings more than just physical instability. Not good, Fu Qian suddenly had an ominous premonition. At the far eastern side of Silver Mist Manor, there's a cedar forest. Seeing that Fu Qian actually knew about it, Ji Liu Huang was elated and quickly continued. Beneath the cedars grows a kind of flower that only blooms at night. Under the moonlight, they're as white as frost and form a beautiful expanse. When you have time, you can go have a look. There's a woman named Ji Shui who likes to take walks there at night. If you see her, you can say hello. Understood, I will take a look if I have the chance. Looking at Ji Liu Huang's earnest face, Fu Qian didn't ask what relation this Ji Shui had with her but nodded in agreement. The next moment, his body leaned entirely against the barrier and squeezed out amidst numerous wails and curses. Soul state incomplete, containment failed. Almost the instant he regained his freedom, Fu Qian heard a prompt by his ear. As expected, it wasn't going to work. Although he had a faint feeling of something being amiss upon discovering the memory disorder, it was still a sigh-inducing reality when faced head-on. This clearly meant that his own approach of forcing a qualitative change through quantitative integration had allowed his physical body to come out but damaged his soul in the process, thus not considered a complete escape. This mission must have some sort of compulsion. Intense pain coursed through him, and Fu Qian looked down at himself. Clusters of blood burst open all over his body, and his surface was packed with agonized faces as his body rapidly disintegrated. Amid the wails, the scene before his eyes quickly shattered. Back in the familiar warehouse, Fu Qian didn't rush to curse but closed his eyes, straining to remember Ji Liu Huang's appearance. In just a few seconds, it had already become completely blurry. At least this further proved his guess was correct. Mission failed. Evaluation, merciless blood wrist. Kills, Zhao Ran. Special kills, Feng Yunhong, Li Weishuan, Qi Hesheng, Luo Binhai, Shui Jing, Grimwood, Belazov. Special kills reward, Clear Dream Ring. Special kills reward, Feast. Current SAN points, 55. Would you like to play the event recap? After going through the string of summary information, Fu Qian was stunned for quite a while before he remembered who Zhaoren was, the unlucky assassin brother. As for that list of special kills, Fu Qian made a point of counting them and found there were no fewer than 27 people. No need to say, this group was the transcendents who had been consumed by Feng Yunhong over the years, the ones who had been berating him madly just now. Feng Yunhong, this guy, only fought until the enemies were critically low without taking their heads, and ended up sending me 2.5 godsends. Chapter 49, Chapter 49, Chapter 48 Feast_1. Chapter 49, Chapter 48 Feast_1. Clear Dream Ring. After activation, it induces a brief shared dreamscape within a certain radius. Fu Qian checked the rewards from the two super deities, and to his surprise, the clear dream ring turned out to be another ring. However, saying another might not be correct, since the tyrant's fist, although shaped like a ring, is defined as a weapon. Compared to the tyrant's fist, the appearance of the clear dream ring is much more normal. The silver-white metallic ring is carved with intricate patterns, and its face is set with tiny gems, clustering into a spiral nebula. With a gentle motion, ice blue light flows around, dreamlike and illusory. Inducing people within a certain range into a dreamscape sounds a bit like hypnosis, but the special part must be this shared dreamscape. Making a group of people have the same dream. Inception, huh? That could be interesting. He couldn't think of any immediate use for it, but the design of the ring was quite beautiful, so Fu Qian immediately slipped it onto his other middle finger. Moving on to the next reward, Fu Qian shifted his attention to the feast. Feast substantially enhances life vitality and cannot be deactivated after activation. The form of the body is not important, only the joy of the soul constitutes the feast. By the name, I thought it was some kind of skill like regenerating health by eating corpses, but it seems like the target of the feast is myself. Substantially increases life vitality. Fu Qian was puzzled. It seemed his current life vitality was already high enough. How could it increase further? And the part about it being irreversible once activated looked rather serious. It's another point of no return. Unfortunately, Fu Qian was a person with strong curiosity. After hesitating for a few seconds, he persuaded himself and chose to activate the skill. A soft glow lit up from the feast, and then it disappeared into the void. At the same time, Fu Qian felt a series of vibrating ripples appear within his body, quickly sweeping through his entire form. Bones, muscles, tendons, all resonated with the ripples at every location, and finally overlapped on the skin, creating echo after echo. After a long while, the vibrations slowly ceased. Looks like there's no obvious change. Fu Qian clenched his fists, feeling that his strength hadn't increased noticeably. The next moment, he felt something, and swung out a punch into the void. The rush of wind howled, and at the end of the punch, his index finger suddenly stretched straight out. Accompanied by a whooshing sound, the index finger extended a whole arm's length, transforming into a finger spear. I think I understand what this enhanced life vitality is all about. Fu Qian retracted his finger and took a deep breath. With a tearing sound, a huge mouth opened at his chest, revealing numerous sharp fangs. Just as I thought. This transformation, which used to be quite strenuous, could now be achieved in an instant, even without first creating a wound. Fu Qian quickly returned to his original form, essentially confirming the change brought about by the feast. If the thug form lifted the limits of strength as a human being, then the feast lifted the traditional restrictions on physical form. He could now freely control any part of his body to transform, without worrying about his body collapsing. Impressive. Just a bit freakish. But all in all, it was worth the effort. Overall, Fu Qian was quite satisfied with his gains. Having checked his rewards, he chose to replay the incident. Just then, he realized he had overlooked something. The notice of containment failure had only appeared after he exited the barrier, which was not in itself unreasonable. However, he distinctly remembered the scene when, 2-292, leak occurred previously. When Wenli lost her chance for advancement due to Wen Xiuxian being killed, leading to her mental breakdown, he'd received the mission failure notification immediately. Comparing the two, it actually suggested something, that up until he walked out of the barrier in a state of breakdown, there was still a chance to complete containment. That meant there must be a way inside the furnace to reverse his mental breakdown. Rushing through to the end, Fu Qian watched himself, who had already stepped outside the barrier, in a state of both physical and mental collapse. His body was severely misshapen, covered in faces wanting to escape, so clear that even the expressions on the faces could be distinguished. Among the faces, men and women could be discerned, many correlating with the blood faces from after Feng Yunhong's self-detonation. But it seemed to be missing something. Frowning, Fu Qian rewound to the moment of Feng Yunhong's self-detonation and, upon close inspection, indeed spotted an anomaly. After Feng Yunhong exploded into a storm of flesh and blood, all the blood faces diffuse in the area had acquired a strange mark, shaped like four hands rotating counterclockwise. This. Considering Feng Yunhong's condition the first time he'd seen him, even Li Weishuan hadn't noticed anything off, which implied that he'd suppressed the consciousness of these blood faces effectively. Feng Yunhong was clearly hiding something secret, utilizing a special method to suppress mental breakdown to a certain extent, allowing himself to avoid a state of confusion. This probably explained why he had angrily criticized his actions at that time as reckless. It seemed necessary to find a way to have a deep conversation with him. After reviewing the footage several times and confirming he hadn't missed anything, Fu Qian decisively touched the missed gate again. 1 SAN point consumed for another containment attempt, current SAN points, 54. 1%, 5%, 15%, 50%, 75%, 99%, 100%, containment scene loading complete. Strange, is this place on the map? Yuan Xin's voice came from ahead as a half-collapsed wall appeared, and the team began discussing a halt to regroup. Action had begun. Stretching lazily, Fu Qian walked from the back of the group to the front under the incredulous gazes of his teammates. Fu Qian, what's the matter? Don't change the formation without permission. Yuan Xin, who was discussing with Ji Liuzhuang, noticed his odd behavior and called out unhappily, but the latter turned a deaf ear. I'm talking to you. Annoyed, Yuan Xin reached out to grab Fu Qian's shoulder, but unexpectedly missed as Fu Qian had already moved several meters away from the team. I'm going to scout ahead. Without looking back and not stopping, Fu Qian stepped over the barrier wall in his path. Without so much as a glance back from Fu Qian, Yuan Xin was first stunned, then a wave of annoyance washed over him. However, he wasn't about to lose his composure over this, and after taking a deep breath, he looked at Ji Liuzhuang with a questioning glance. She hesitated before shaking her head. It seems Fu Qian doesn't want us to follow. To be safe, let's stick to the plan and rest here for now. We'll try to inform Director Li later. Before Ji Liuzhuang could finish speaking, her gaze suddenly froze. From within the shadows, a cluster of black spikes shot out from behind the wall, densely targeting Fu Qian's back. Amidst gasps of alarm, Fu Qian's back seemed to grow eyes as he lightly stepped on the ground and leaped forward. He just managed to dodge the sneak attack, his body swiftly disappearing into the mist. The 9-person team stood dazed in place. It took a while for them to react and jump away from the wall's position. Chapter 50, Chapter 50, Chapter 49 You are the legendary Dean Feng _1. Chapter 50, Chapter 49 You are the legendary Dean Feng _1. Fu Qian didn't stop for a moment as he moved through the ruins. He was already familiar with this route he'd taken twice before, and he was even clear about the locations where monsters would ambush him. He encountered almost no obstacles along the way, and he soon reached the blood pool at the center. From a distance, he could already see Feng Yunhong shaping something in the recess. Moving his facial muscles, Fu Qian quickly stepped forward, and the next moment, his pupils suddenly dilated. Feng. Director Yunhong. It took a full 10 seconds before the wax-like Feng Yunhong finally showed some movement. Drawing a long breath, as if he had just woken from a dream, Feng Yunhong slowly opened his eyes and looked at Fu Qian. Who are you? This place is very dangerous. You're Director Feng, right? Fu Qian did not answer his question, but continued with a look of surprise. I knew you were all right. I've finally found you. You know me. Feng Yunhong furrowed his brows. Of course. Fu Qian nodded vigorously. I've seen your picture at the academy, you haven't changed a bit over the years, I recognized you right away. The academy. As if he had heard of something long past, Feng Yunhong paused before he reacted and shook his head. That was many years ago. Yes, the teachers at the academy often mention the mysterious disappearance of the 4th director. It has been at least several decades by now. It is said that Director Li later was always looking for your whereabouts. Director Li, He. He's become a director too, huh? Feng Yunhong sighed deeply, his face a mixture of aging and a trace of relief. Not bad acting, Fu Qian praised internally. Yes, but Director Li has retired for many years now, traveling everywhere, and he has always valued your strength highly. Feng Yunhong waved his hand and looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, the very picture of one who has seen through the vicissitudes of life. All this fleeting fame, like passing clouds and smoke. Speaking of which, you also are a hero among the young. He looked at Fu Qian appreciatively. So young and already at 6th phase, in our time, you'd definitely be hailed as a young prodigy. You flatter me too much, Director Feng. I am but standing on the shoulders of giants. Without the many years of exploration by the predecessors, how could the path to cultivation be so smooth? While being modest, Fu Qian frowned, looking at the miserable state of Feng Yunhong's lower body. What happened to you? Who did this? It would be difficult to explain in a short time. It's all because I was too careless back then. This place is extremely ominous, you must be very careful. Feng Yunhong cautioned Fu Qian with the posture of an elder. I understand. Fu Qian nodded earnestly, continuing to look at Feng Yunhong's lower body with grief and indignation. I will call the others right away, and we will definitely find a way to rescue you. Are there other people? Hearing what Fu Qian said, Feng Yunhong's eyes lit up, then he chuckled resignedly, shaking his head. It's the thought that counts. At my age, I have long been indifferent to life or death, and living up to now has been nothing but a struggle to hang on. The dangers in here are countless, you don't need to risk your lives for me. Please don't say that. Fu Qian shook his head vigorously. I'll go call them now. Deputy Director Li Weishuan, who is with us, is at the peak of 4th phase and has the sword heart clarity that specially overcomes evil and filth. He will surely find a way to get you out, just wait. While comforting Feng Yunhong, Fu Qian pretended to leave. The next moment, however, he stopped suddenly, his brows deeply furrowed. What's wrong? Feng Yunhong's eyes narrowed slightly as he sized up Fu Qian. Do you ever? Fu Qian looked around incessantly, as if searching for something. Hear someone talking. Someone talking. How could that be? There are no other people here besides us two. Feng Yunhong's face was filled with confusion. Did you hear it wrong? But there really is. Fu Qian looked puzzled. It's a woman's voice, incessantly saying to let her out. Her name seems to be Shui Jing. Wait, there's another man's voice. Qi Hesheng, how can this be? Fu Qian casually named 2 individuals, noticing the sudden change in Feng Yunhong's expression. The blood pool area is rife with curses that sometimes cause hallucinations. You might be affected by them. You'd better leave quickly to avoid further harm. Feng Yunhong hurried Fu Qian along swiftly. Understood, I'll leave right now. Fu Qian nodded his head and bowed to Feng Yunhong. Take care, I'll be back soon. No need to rush, this old man has been here for so many years, there's no hurry for a moment. Feng Yunhong laughed heartily, watching Fu Qian leave until he completely vanished into the thin mist. After traveling some distance, Fu Qian turned and initially used a stone tower to block the view, then he quietly doubled back. Of course, he wouldn't really go and bring Li Weishuan and the others over. The reason he had said that before was to let Feng Yunhong know that more prey would be coming, so he wouldn't blow himself up just yet. Secondly, it was to put enough pressure on the old gentleman. He had emphasized that Li Weishuan was at the pinnacle of the 4th phase with exceptionally sharp senses, and then told him that he had heard cries for help. If even he could hear anomalies, Feng Yunhong would certainly worry about being exposed in front of Li Weishuan. If Feng truly had a way to suppress the swallowed transcendence, he would definitely take action. Moving swiftly back to the side of the blood pool, Fu Qian found that Feng Yunhong had disappeared. And in his original spot, there was now an opening that continued downwards. This place. Fu Qian recalled the archdome that had been revealed when Li Weishuan and Feng Yunhong had fought. There really was something below. Fu Qian jumped over the blood pool once again to the edge of the opening, discovering that below was a series of interlacing stone beams. Without the slightest hesitation, Fu Qian jumped down. Speed is of the essence in war, and Feng Yunhong's actions wouldn't be too slow. Landing lightly on a massive arched stone beam, Fu Qian carefully observed the interior of the structure. The space was not very large, but the height was significant, and he was now standing on its beams. It was hard to imagine how such a structure could have sunk into the ground. By its overall appearance, this place should have originally been a church or something similar, but now it was barely recognizable. The entire interior of the building presented an extremely bizarre scene. Most parts were empty. Tables, chairs, roof tiles, lamp fixtures, colored glaze, all the interior decorations had accumulated in the very center of the building. Not only that, these items seemed to be drawn by some force, distortedly forming into a huge four-pronged spiral shape. The symbol on Blood-Face's head. A thought struck Fu Qian, confirming that he had found the right place. In the center of the counterclockwise spiral was a rough stone chair. At this moment, the vanished Feng Yunhong was sitting on it, his body emitting waves of wailing. He's so fast. Come to think of it, has this guy just been standing up there the whole time, swallowing people, and then running down here to digest them? That's really steady. Chapter 51, Chapter 51, Chapter 50 Crazy_1. Chapter 51, Chapter 50 Crazy_1. This place was still at a great height above the ground, but for Fu Qian, that was no longer a problem. He jumped down silently from above and walked straight to the front of the stone throne. Feng Yunhong sat on the stone throne with his eyes tightly closed, motionless, showing no reaction to Fu Qian's arrival. At this distance, the whimpers were already very clear, and one could even see the vague faces on Feng Yunhong's body. Each one had an expression of ferocious agony, as if enduring immense pain. Since Feng Yunhong had no reaction, Fu Qian quietly observed, not missing any detail. The scene, along with the mysterious patterns surrounding it, allowed one to infer that the stone throne was quite a special existence. It seemed that Feng Yunhong relied on it to suppress the consciousness of other transcendence. Soon, Fu Qian noticed that the whimpers were growing fainter, the faces more blurred, until they disappeared one by one beneath the skin. Even Feng Yunhong's physique seemed to shrink a bit, not as exaggerated as before. The effect was quite remarkable. Fu Qian shook his hands and took a step forward. At the same time, Feng Yunhong suddenly opened his eyes and stared him down intently. "What do you think you're doing?" "Good day to you, Elder Feng." Without a hint of embarrassment at being caught in the act, Fu Qian greeted him with composure. Feng Yunhong let out a cold laugh. "Fool, do you really think I have lost consciousness? From the moment you came down, I noticed you." "I wouldn't know that." Fu Qian sighed. Based on prior experiences, it was clear that this person was extremely wary. Even if, after hearing his words, Feng Yunhong became anxious to deal with the hidden dangers, he wouldn't lay bare his secrets without a fallback in front of others. This guy had been mingling around here for many decades, his familiarity with the surroundings was beyond imagination. Fu Qian never thought he could deceive him, nor had he made any effort to hide his form. Watching Fu Qian, Feng Yunhong wore a cruel smile. "With your suspicious words, you think I would believe you? I've been busy just now and let you live a little longer. Had you made a move earlier, you might have caused me some trouble, but now, you're only facing one outcome. Just like those things just now, right?" Fu Qian replied lazily. "May I be so bold as to ask what you were doing just now?" "You can guess." Feng Yunhong stood up from the stone throne. "It doesn't matter if you can't guess, you'll soon experience it." He picked up the long halberd beside him with one hand. "Believe me, you'll experience it for a long, long time." "Well, that's not bad. You really are ignorant of death." Feng Yunhong swung his long halberd with a glint of cold light, and Fu Qian narrowly dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. "Pretty fast at running away." Feng Yunhong snorted, his long halberd in motion, unleashing endless streaks of cold light. The capability of this stranger who came out of nowhere was indeed not bad, and worst of all, he knew too much. He had already developed a killing intent, he absolutely could not let Fu Qian escape. Unexpectedly, the other party showed no intention of running away. Instead of retreating, he advanced, dodging the long halberd and engaging in close combat. Had this man gone mad? While somewhat perplexed by Fu Qian's suicidal behavior, Feng Yunhong was merciless in his attacks, intent on a swift and decisive victory. Feng Yunhong wielded his halberd expertly, and the gap in their realms enabled him to dominate the confrontation. Quickly, unable to dodge, a bloodstain appeared on Fu Qian's arm. Just as Feng Yunhong was about to press the attack, a flash of scarlet brilliance suddenly appeared in front of him. Crack! The scarlet whip that appeared out of the void landed solidly on Feng Yunhong's body. A hidden weapon. Feng Yunhong was startled, and seeing Fu Qian with empty hands, he couldn't determine the source of the attack. Before he could figure it out, the next moment, a strong sense of irritability surged in Feng Yunhong's heart, giving him an urge to tear everything around him to shreds. What is this? Shocked, Feng Yunhong swiftly increased the distance, pointing his long halberd at Fu Qian. Master Feng, you're so full of energy, let me help you liven up even more. Fu Qian chuckled and, without pause, charged forward to engage in close combat once again. From the start, he had never planned to run. At a glance, Feng Yunhong seemed to be in quite a good condition. With the influence of the stone seat, the discordance in his body was almost completely suppressed, turning any engagement with him into suicidal behavior at this time. But Fu Qian was certain that the 26 blood-drained heads were still there and had not truly been annihilated. If they were so easily digested, how could Feng Yunhong remain troubled by them for decades? He believed that with the right stimulus, they would become active once again. Under such circumstances, it was a perfect opportunity for Tyrant's Fist to come into play. Qi Hesheng, Luo Binhai, Shui Jing, Grimwood, all of you get fired up. What the hell is going on? As time went by, Feng Yunhong became more and more apprehensive as he fought, his long halberd glowing coldly. In a continuous blur, leaving one wound after another on his opponent. Yet, this guy was obviously incredibly resilient, despite being covered in wounds, he never fell, not even slowing down appreciably. Meanwhile, Feng Yunhong had already been lashed by the Scarlet Whip more than a dozen times. With each strike, the mania in his heart intensified, and now his violent emotions were so elevated that they even began to affect his attacks. And that wasn't the worst part. The Transcendence consciousness, originally suppressed steadily, was showing signs of instability. The whales re-emerged, clearly affected by the raging emotions, and the state became exceedingly unstable. I can't drag this out any longer. Feng Yunhong made up his mind and let out an ear-splitting roar. The massive wave of sound echoed inside the building, causing Fu Qian, who was rushing forward, to stagger. Simultaneously, the long halberd, moving even faster than before, tore through Fu Qian's body. You have secrets, and I haven't been fighting with all my strength just now. Looking at the neck that was nearly severed completely, Feng Yunhong revealed a sinister smile. However, before he could catch his breath, a scarlet whip crashed down on his head, completely igniting the frenzy in his heart. How is this possible? Seeing his opponent still standing, Feng Yunhong froze. Master, don't get distracted. A mouth had grown on the palm of Fu Qian's right hand, speaking in a mocking tone. His original head rapidly shriveled until only a layer of skin remained. Trying Feast for the first time in combat, the effect is even better than I imagined. To some extent, I now have no vital spots at all. A new head quickly sprouted, and Fu Qian did not stop his hand movements for a moment as the scarlet whip lashed furiously on Feng Yunhong's body. Under the effect of Tyrant's Fist, the wails around the latter grew louder, and parts of his body even started to twist. Do you think you've won? Realizing that the chaos in his mind and body was irreparable, Feng Yunhong let out a harsh roar. The next moment, he actually threw away his long halberd and reached out to grab Fu Qian's neck. Part 3 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.